The Innkeeper by Life Sketcher. Chapter 21 Survival. Lex's speed instantly picked up once he exited the park onto the cobblestone road. The style and architecture of the buildings was dramatically different from what Lex was used to on Earth, but he couldn't be bothered with that now. All he cared about was getting to some place safe. The road, a wide single path cutting through the city, was littered with large rectangular objects Lex could only assume were vehicles, though he saw no tires. There were no windows in the cars either, so he couldn't look through them and didn't know how to open them, so they were automatically disqualified as a hiding place. The buildings, which were only a couple stories high, seemed as if they were cut out of large rocks as they had no joints or seams, and most importantly, no doors or windows. How was he supposed to get in? Lex continued limping in the darkness, further and further away from the park. Fortunately, there didn't seem to be any living zombies roaming the roads. He said living zombies because the roads seemed to be littered with dead, rotten bodies he could only assume were zombies. That made him feel at ease, as that probably meant there were living humans clearing the. A loud crash attracted his attention, which was followed by more banging. It seemed someone was fighting. After thinking for a moment, he slowly started moving towards the sound, doing his best to stay out of sight. If he found a few people, he could possibly consider joining them. In the few minutes that he had been walking, his pain had reduced, however slight. That at least proved Botlamdu seemed to be effective, for now. Leaning against the cars for support and cover, he peeked around a corner to see if he could get a view of the fight. What he saw was not humans fighting zombies. Instead, he saw an 8-foot giant monster that looked like it might have once been a lion viciously devouring a small horde of zombies. The zombies, moving with their usual slow pace, gathered around the lion and tried attacking it. They scraped and bit the lion but seemed to be doing no damage, while the lion casually bit the head of a zombie and seemed to be sucking something out of its body. The already decayed zombie shriveled up before the lion flung it away, crashing it into a nearby car, and bit the next one. Lex was horrified. Then he slowly started moving backwards. Although his steps were already light, he did his best to not make even the slightest bit of noise as he retreated. Every time his backpack would rustle, he would be horrified. This world was too scary. The situation, however, did not seem to be improving. When he turned around, he saw several zombies walking towards the lion from the distance, and he was directly in their path. The loud noise of the fight was too prominent in the silent night. He had to get out of the line of sight immediately. Quickly he changed his direction and walked down a different street, gripping his knife tightly, as if it was the only thing giving him courage. Lightning flashed through the sky again, and the thunder that followed seemed to signal the start of a devastating storm. The rain started spontaneously and fell with such speed and ferocity that it would put a charging army to shame. It was around this time that he finally saw a building with a small portion of the wall collapsed. Thanking his miserable luck finally turning, he stumbled towards the building and entered it. It was completely dark now, and except for the few flashes of lightning occasionally, Lex had no other source of light. He was a little fearful. He didn't want to enter the building without being able to see. What if he walked right into a zombie? It was then, like a revelation from the heavens, that he remembered that he had packed a flashlight. Stumbling through his backpack, he searched for the light and turned it on. Not wanting to attract too much attention in the darkness, he immediately entered the building into what he assumed was once a living room. Broken furniture and shattered glass covered the floor like rubble, and the room showed clear signs of a fight. A few skeletons lay on the ground, broken and dismembered. The one thing the room did not have, however, was a door that led deeper into the house. The people of this world must have had some other way to enter and exit. Lex would have to figure that out somehow. For now though, he needed rest. Lex stumbled to a corner in the room and dragged the remains of a couch to cover him as he sat to rest out of sight. He closed the torch so as to not attract attention, but remained vigilant in case he discovered zombies coming towards him. The knife was still gripped tightly in his hand. A woman stood nervously in a large drawing room, dressed in a very formal-looking suit, gripping her son's hand tightly. Her son, a small boy who stood beside her, looked around the large room in wonder and awe. Once the child had been in rooms much more lavish than this, but he was young and memories even a few months old were too ancient for him, let alone those from further back. His left hand was a little uncomfortable. His mother was squeezing too tightly, but he did not say anything as he knew his mother would only do that when she was not feeling well. His mother was often not feeling well these days. She thought he didn't know, but he could tell. He didn't know how to make her feel better though. He was only a child. Sometimes he would share his cereal with her, or save some candy he got from school to give to her. In his right hand the child was holding a golden key. It was a toy he'd gotten from somewhere, he couldn't remember where, and he really liked it. Holding the key made him feel stronger, and sometimes when he was cold it would keep him warm. He tried to give his mother the key so she would feel better, but she was usually busy with other things. He kept the key with him always, so that when his mother was less busy he could give it to her. While the child was lost in his own thoughts, an old man entered the room with a male nurse helping him walk and a female nurse pulling in pole with a drip that was attached to the man's hand. The old man looked weak, but his eyes were filled with energy as he looked at the woman before him. "Hera, my child, it's good to see you, it's good to see you. What an age it's been since we last met. Come closer, let me get a better look at you." The man spoke jovially and waved at the woman to come closer. "I remember your wedding, such a happy day. Much happier times, those," the old man said while reminiscing. "Yes," Hera said softly, trying her best not to let herself think back to then. Her husband had died, along with the rest of her family, and thinking back to happier days brought her more pain than relief. The old man in front of her was not really that old. He was in his late 50s, and at her wedding he had been strong and healthy. A rare disease in recent years had sapped most of his strength, leaving him in his current predicament. He was also an old family friend, the only one so far who had agreed to meet her. It was funny, so many of the people who she used to think were close to her had suddenly become distant after her family died and she was left destitute. Even when this old man, Will, agreed to meet, she was scared he had some ulterior motives. Still, she had no choice but to give it a shot. "This must be young Jimmy. Such a handsome young boy," the old man said, looking at the child. But Jimmy suddenly moved behind his mother, as if hiding from him. Hera smiled weakly at the old man, as if to apologize about the child's behavior, but Will didn't seem to mind and only looked at them fondly. "I was very surprised to hear from you. I hadn't heard about your family." "I'm sorry to hear about them," the man uttered with a forlorn voice. "I would have reached out to you myself if I had known. My health keeps me occupied, I barely meet anybody these days." "It's all right," Hera said with some difficulty. "You have troubles of your own. Just agreeing to meet with me is a great favor." "Nonsense," the old man interrupted. "You're like family, child, like family. How could I let you stay out there all alone when I heard about what you're going through? You will stay with me, and I will help you get back on your feet. It's settled." "No, that's not." The woman tried to speak. It was not her intention to accept handouts, but the old man would not have it. "None of this, no, that's not business, child, none of it. There's not much that this old man can do anymore, but that doesn't mean I will let family suffer out in the world alone. Your father was like my brother, your mother was like my elder sister. How would I face them if they were to find out I let you suffer so much? No, child, you mustn't treat me like an outsider. You must stay, and keep this old man company. It's been so gloomy in this house these past few years, your presence will liven the place up." Hera almost teared up, though she controlled herself quickly. The old man was insistent and stubborn, but she felt from him a caring warmth she hadn't in a long time. The child, who had been listening to everything so far, kept looking between the old man and his mother. It seemed like they would be living with him now, and somehow that made his mother happy. The child thought for a bit, then slowly crept out from behind his mother and approached the scary-looking old man. He was skinny and wrinkly and had veins showing all over his body, but he was a good guy if he could make his mother happy. Finally, he held up the golden key to the old man and mumbled, "For you." The old man was taken aback by the shy child's gesture, but smiled and reached out to take the golden key. When he touched the key though, he was rocked to his very core as he stared at it in horror and excitement. Hera noticed the old man's body tremble, his pale face regain color and his weakness change into strength. Immediately she knew something had happened. She signaled Jimmy to hand over the key and quickly pulled him back to her side, but the old man didn't seem to notice. All of his attention was focused on the key that was now in his hand, and the subtle warmth it spread into his body. "How many years?" the man mumbled to himself. "How many years has it been?" In fact, the man did not need to wonder, as he could probably recall down to the exact minute how long it had been since he last felt the comforting warmth of spiritual energy course through his body. He broke from his reverie and looked at Hera and Jimmy with immeasurable excitement and glee before asking, "Where did you get this? Do you know what it is?" Hera looked at the key and tried to recall. She had no memory of it, except that she had seen her son holding it whilst he slept at the apartment. Where could he have gotten it from except from there? "Isn't it just a key?" "It was in the apartment when I moved in, it probably belonged to my father, he was the only one who ever lived there before." "In your apartment? The last bit of your inheritance, I assume?" Will asked, his smile growing as though he suddenly understood something. "Hera, child, have a seat. We have some business to discuss." The old man sat comfortably, gripping the key tightly in his right hand, while he asked his nurse to make a call to his lawyer. While they waited, the old man's home staff served refreshments and they all made small talk, though no one was too interested at the moment. The old man was clearly distracted by the key, while Hera was very curious as to what Will was thinking. She had no money and resources. If the key was something valuable, the old man could take it, and there was no way for her to fight back. He could even say the key was repayment for him taking care of her, but the old man insisted that business was business and family was family, the two should not mix. 20 minutes later his lawyer finally came, along with an entire team of important-looking people, all with their laptops in hand, ready to work at a moment's notice. Hera dear, you must be confused, so let me explain the situation first. This key, the old man said, holding up the golden key in his hand, is more than it appears. In the hands of someone who does not understand its value, it is simply a trinket. However, in my hands it instantly becomes something of inestimable value. To be exact, currently even I cannot accurately determine what its value should be. Determining that will take time and research. Despite that, I want to purchase it from you. I have two propositions for you. You can pick the one you think is more suitable for you. First, I can pay you a total sum of $100 million to purchase it from you. After that I will become the owner, and whether the key ends up being more or less valuable has nothing to do with you. Second, I can pay you an initial sum of $1 million and then take my time to determine its exact value, before paying you that amount. This way it could end up being more than $100 million or it could be less. The risk is yours to take. The lawyer and his team had immediately opened their laptops and started working whilst the old man talked, and even now. The environment was suddenly so drastically different Hera was not able to acclimate. She shook her head and looked at the old man in slight confusion. Uncle Will, if you didn't tell me about it I would never even know there's anything special about the key. You could have just taken it and I would not have said anything. Why did you tell me? The old man chuckled when he heard Hera's question, and looked at the girl with a look of endearment. I'm an old man, on the verge of death. What value does money have for me? 1 million or 100 million, neither will keep me from dying, nor will they affect how I live my life. You, on the other hand, still have a long life ahead of you and a son to take care of. This money will seriously affect you every day for the rest of your life. This decision will follow every other decision you will make for the rest of your life. How can I lack this little bit of virtue and steal from you, who is like my own daughter? You should make the decision you think is best for you and your child. Hera heard the old man's words and felt moved. Her life had been so miserable recently, and she did not see any brightness in her future coming soon. But now, everything felt so different. She looked at her son, tears forming in her eyes again, and the child looked back at her. It's very nice, the child mumbled, telling his mother about the key. It keeps me warm. Hera nodded, as if understanding what the child was trying to tell her. She hugged the child as she was filled with determination. Since this opportunity was brought to her by her son, she would listen to him and take a risk with $1 million. The sound of thunder woke Lex up, who had not realized at all he had fallen asleep. Fortunately, nothing bad happened while he was dozing off. Instead, his chest felt much better and all his pain was gone. He also felt more clear-headed now that he had time to gather his wits and wasn't constantly trying to survive. He was most surprised to discover that instead of feeling fear or panic, he was feeling excitement. The heart-pumping, adrenaline-filled adventure that he had felt more enjoyable than anything he had ever done. Obviously at the time he was taken by surprise and didn't have the time to think of anything else, but now it was different. It was only now that he felt like he was in the cultivation world, and that he felt most alive when he was fighting for his life. He had to survive long enough to connect this world to the inn, and he could do so by hiding and surviving off of the stuff he had in his backpack, but he no longer felt like hiding in the dark till he could escape. He pulled up his quest menu and took a look. Quests. New quest. As the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Remark, keep working hard. If you raise your cultivation high enough, one day you'll be able to cast illusions to make yourself look better. Quest, with a great personality and abundant energy, Marlowe is a great candidate to serve as a valet for the inn. Hire Marlowe as your first valet. Quest time limit, 1 month, 6/30 days. Quest reward, 1 small staff dormitory, 1000 MP, plus 1 midnight inn level. Quest failure punishment, -1000 MP, if host is unable to pay, it will result in immediate death. Sudden quest, kill 20 zombies before returning to Midnight Inn. Quest status, 220 zombies killed. Quest rewards, 1000 MP. Quest failure punishment, none. He had killed 2 zombies while escaping the park since he had received the quest, and had 18 more to go. Lex grinned with excitement. He could envision himself, sneaking in the dark like a ninja, stealthily killing zombies. But he was not a man who did things in a rush, he had to be prepared first. He opened his backpack and took out a few granola bars to fill himself up. Fighting, running and then healing must have exhausted his body, even if he could not feel it yet. He collected rainwater in an empty water bottle he had and drank some to rehydrate himself. Finally, he took off his shirt and armor to get a better look at his chest and assess his condition. He had no bites or scratches anywhere, so there was no chance of infection, but his chest was mostly pink and purple, even after all that healing. The bruises ached, but he could tell that his bones at least weren't hurt anymore. He assessed his equipment, and other than his knife he only had a Swiss Army knife which barely gave him an advantage in combat. The fire starter would be useless in the rain, so the only thing he could use to help him was his fancy monocle and flashlight. That suddenly reminded him of his fancy monocle, and how he had manually set it to only show him data he thought was relevant because otherwise it showed too much data, but the monocle could not always determine what was relevant. He had the monocle analyze the entire building and give him all the details. The building was made of igneous rock, the furniture of some kind of wood, and there were pieces of identifiable metals all around. The rainwater was normal and everything seemed to be ordinary. The monocle discovered no secret entrance hidden in the walls or some mechanism to make a door appear. Lex felt it was a pity, but it was probably because it had not yet had access to any kind of database from this world yet. Regardless, there was nothing more he could do at the moment to prepare. Now was the time to actually go out and take some risks. Lex grinned. It was time to kill some zombies. Risk. To a degree Lex had become used to the darkness and could make out vague shapes in the distance. The constant rain made it difficult for him to hear any walking zombies, but similarly it stopped them from hearing him as well. Lex's eyes gleamed with excitement as he confirmed everything was set and stepped out of the building to begin his hunt. First and foremost, he would not hunt anywhere near the building he was in. He was treating that as his home base and didn't want to risk attracting a horde near it. Secondly, he moved in the opposite direction from where he saw the giant lion. That was an enemy he wasn't yet ready to face. He carefully memorized his path as he moved further and further away, crouching behind the cars as he surveyed the city. Similar to what he encountered previously, all the zombies along his way were dead bodies on the ground. It took him a decent amount of time before he finally encountered a few. 3 of them were standing in a daze staring towards a certain building. They were dripping wet from the rain, though that did not seem to bother them. Lex watched them for a while, but they didn't move. Either they knew there was prey in that building or they were just standing there, waiting till they heard an indication of life from anywhere. When he was certain they wouldn't move, he thought about how he should attack them, and repeated the movements in his head a few times. When he was certain, he moved towards the zombie closest to him without hesitation. In one swift movement he grabbed it by the neck and stabbed it through the base of the skull. The zombie died just like that, without any struggle or noise. Carefully, Lex laid the body down on the ground and moved swiftly towards the other 2 zombies. They were standing side by side, so it would be difficult to kill one without alerting the other, so this time Lex didn't bother trying. He repeated the maneuver from last time, grabbing the zombie's neck and stabbing it in the skull, but instead of laying the body on the ground Lex threw the body at the other zombie. The last zombie was knocked over, and before it could do anything Lex stomped hard on its head, killing it instantly. The whole affair was complete in less than 10 seconds, but Lex's heart was beating like a drum, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The entire process was flawless. He couldn't think of a way he could have performed better. These zombies were normal slow ones, and Lex called them regulars. Regulars seemed easy to kill so long as they weren't in a large group. It was the one he faced in the park at the end, mini-boss as Lex had temporarily named it, that was tough. Appearance-wise the mini-boss didn't look too different from regulars, but its actions were distinct and driven with purpose. Lex wanted to avoid those if possible. He was not yet good enough at combat to be confident enough to defeat it every time they fought. As for the lion beast, the big boss, that Lex wanted to avoid at all costs. He had no idea how strong it was, but Lex didn't doubt that he would certainly die if he fought it. He inspected the 3 zombies to see if he could find anything on their bodies that could tell him more about this world, but alas there was nothing. There were barely any clothes, so how could he expect to find anything else? Ignoring his disappointment, he continued on his journey to hunt. After searching for a short while he found another group. This time however there were many of them bunched together moving randomly through the street. There were too many of them and he thought he should avoid them, yet fate had other plans. He heard barking, and suddenly from the horde 2 zombified dogs came bolting towards him. For a moment Lex was filled with panic, an instinctual reaction, but he quickly overcame it and stared at the 2 dogs. He absolutely had to kill them, he couldn't risk letting them bite at him at all. His heartbeat accelerated as he watched the 2 dogs run towards him and his body trembled with nervous energy. The dogs lurched at him, and in a split second he knew they were too close to one another. If he tried attacking one, he would in turn be attacked by the other. He jumped and rolled to his side dodging them, but reached a building with no more room to go that way. Before the dogs could turn and attack him again he launched himself at them, not wasting any time. Attacking their skull with the knife put him too close to their mouth. He didn't want to risk it, so he kicked the first dog as hard as he could on its body, trying to disable it. The first dog was thrown away, but the second one used this time to turn and attack Lex. Once again he jumped and rolled away, feeling slightly like a character from a certain, extremely difficult video game he'd played. Any guesses? To dodge the dog's attack. From the corner of his eye he noticed that the horde of zombies had started moving towards him. He didn't have time to waste. He kicked the second dog and turned to look at the first one. It was still coming at him, but was limping now, so it had slowed down considerably. Lex grinned. It seemed he wasn't so bad at this. He attacked the first dog again, and this time he kicked it on its head. The dog tried to bite at his leg, but Lex was too fast. With that last attack the dog's neck cracked and it became completely disabled, though it was still alive and staring viciously at Lex. With decent practice, he did the same to the second dog, which died instantly when he kicked its head. There was no time to celebrate though, the horde was almost upon him. This time, Lex decided to retreat. Though the regulars were very weak, they had a great advantage in numbers which Lex could not overcome. Not to mention, if a mini-boss was hiding in the horde, Lex would be a goner. Better to run and fight another day. In the dark, with Lex's great running speed, and the roaring of the rain covering the sound of his footsteps, he quickly lost the horde. He took some time to rest this time, not wanting to jump straight into another fight. He wasn't tired, but he didn't have a complete grasp of his body's new stamina and didn't want to risk fatigue in his next fight. After 15 minutes of sitting in the shade, away from the rain, he continued his search. Fortunately his body had become very resistant to the cold, otherwise he would have gotten sick from being in the rain so long. This time, he found zombies fairly quickly. They were in a large horde, much larger than he had ever seen, and they were moving together all in the same direction at their usual pace. He didn't even need a moment to deliberate. Lex retreated and went in the opposite direction. But it was only a few minutes later he found another group of zombies, this time only 4, but they seemed to be heading in the same direction as the larger group. Something was clearly happening, and Lex didn't want to risk his life to find out. Immediately he decided to give up going back to his home base and started moving in the opposite direction to where all the zombies were going. A couple of times he saw some lone zombies limping down a street and used the opportunity to kill them, bringing his quest total to August 20th. Everything was going smoothly, until it wasn't. He heard a loud roar from the direction the zombies were going towards, shaking the city itself with its might, which was followed by a series of loud crashing noises. Someone, or something, was fighting a tough fight and it was making a lot of noise. For a moment Lex was grateful he decided to move away, but then the buildings around him started emitting a soft blue light in the shape of an archway. From within the buildings came out zombies who initially seemed to be attracted to the noise, but quickly caught sight of Lex. Bloody hell. Lex cursed as he started sprinting as fast as he could. Mary, how much longer till I can leave this world? Lex roared in his mind as he kept running. The zombies behind him were already a safe distance away, but new zombies kept exiting buildings around him. He needed to get to a clearing as fast as possible. You've only been in this world for 6 hours, Mary said sympathetically. You have at least 18 more hours to go, with the possibility of more. Bloody hell. Lex swore once again, and promised himself he would never again wish for more excitement in his life. This was too much excitement. Chapter 24 Awakening. Lex picked up his speed and tried to run past the zombies before they noticed him. For the ones who came out as he was running past he was successful, but there were many times where zombies had already exited buildings as he ran past. They would always be attracted to him and start moving in his direction. Initially he was still able to dodge them, but as time went by he had to preemptively start attacking them. Killing zombies wasn't his goal with these attacks. With one look he determined his optimal escape path, then stabbed or tripped any zombies in or near his path, turning them into a hindrance to the zombies behind them. Quick and efficient. Those 2 words could describe his actions at that moment. At first it was just a couple that would come his way, but the horde slowly grew. The once empty streets were filling up with the walking dead. Under normal circumstances Lex would be panicking once again, but unbeknownst to him, he had entered an extremely focused state. When 2 zombies would approach him from the front he would slash the first one's neck and push it towards the other with his body, acting too fast for the zombie to scratch or bite him. When more zombies came his way he would quickly duck and slash the zombie's thighs, making it trip, creating an obstacle for the zombies behind to slow them down. Lex didn't know, but slowly and steadily, even though he didn't mean to, his zombie kill counter was increasing. This was because often when slashed the neck he started cutting the head clean off and other zombies would then stampede over the head, killing it. In barely a few minutes he completed the 20 kills, and the quest was updated, but Lex remained completely unaware. This was because by now he was almost completely surrounded. Giving up trying to run, he climbed up onto one of the cars. On an instinct he instructed the fancy monocle to collect data on how the blue light doors that the zombies were coming from worked and updated him when it discovered something. The car was rectangular and around 8 feet high and almost 15 feet long, which gave Lex a decent amount of space to maneuver. But he didn't have time to think further, zombies were climbing up behind him. He kicked a zombie hard on its chest, flinging it away into the zombie behind it, knocking them all down, but there was no respite. Behind him he felt a zombie cling onto his shoulders and attempt to bite him, but before it could he elbowed it to push it away. He turned, stabbed it through the eye and moved on to the next zombie as if it were nothing. By this point he could no longer continue to dodge scratches. On his chest, his arms, his legs, everywhere zombies had tried to scratch him, but fortunately so far it seemed they were unable to break through his skin, but repeated attempts might still be able to pierce through. That's not to say he was unhurt. His body was covered in bruises both old and new, but he felt neither. Even his synthetic armor started to show signs of wear, but in the dark, rainy night who was paying attention to that? Slowly, his efficiency improved even further. He used the momentum from one attack to flow into another, turning from his rigid, repetitive motions to smooth, flowing ones. When he saw an attack coming he could not avoid, he would try to catch it on his chest so his under armor could protect him. He got another notification from the system, but it was ignored just the same. The monocle gave him a notification, but as if it were an unnecessary distraction Lex ignored it. Lex was now a killing machine. With his right hand he would stab, and with his left hand he would use his index and middle finger to stab zombies through the eyes. It was not something he consciously thought of, it was something that he naturally started doing. A pile of bodies had fallen on the ground around the car which had built a path for zombies to climb up, which only increased the pressure on him. While this was happening, Lex was mowing through anything that approached him, his clothes ripped to shreds and his backpack lost somewhere along the way. He was covered in sweat and the spilled blood of his enemies. A zombie approached him slowly from the back, waiting to catch him off guard. It studied him, studied his attack patterns, and slowly crawled towards him. It was mixed in with the undead bodies on the floor so as to not attract attention to itself. Lex turned his back towards the zombie to attack in the other direction, and the zombie immediately launched itself at him. In one quick jolt it had gone from the ground to almost on top of Lex, and just when it thought it was about to reach him, Lex moved. Spinning on his heel Lex avoided the zombie's lurch and swiped at its neck with his knife, using its own momentum to cut its neck. From start to finish, Lex had not even seen the zombie. To him it was just a single moment between so many other intense moments, but he would be surprised to know that this was the third mini-boss zombie he had dispatched so effortlessly whereas he had struggled so much with it before. Somewhere along the way Lex lost his knife too. It broke or got stuck or was pulled from his hand, he could not remember, but he had lost it. That had not slowed him down though. His punches delivered a devastating blow to the zombies' skulls, his fingers piercing though as if daggers, and his kicks launched zombies far away as if they were shot through a cannon. He had awakened a primal side of him he had never known, his brain was working faster than he had ever thought possible, and his actions followed almost as quickly as he thought of something. In this life or death moment, Lex had completely let his instincts take over, and if the mad Marlowe were to look at him now, it would be up for debate which one of them was the mad one. The downside of such feral fighting was that he had become completely numb and so did not notice that along with battered bruises, his body was slowly starting to be covered in cuts and scratches. Lex quickly hid, he suddenly heard a roaring sound in his head, and he recognized it as Mary. Before he could ask her what happened, he noticed a red warning flashing on his monocle, pointing towards his left. When he turned to look his pupils shrunk and he was filled with horror. The giant mutated lion was rushing in his direction, being chased by what looked like a giant 10 feet tall zombie. Lex didn't need any more motivation, he jumped as far off from the car as he could and launched into a sprint. Approach the center of a building and put your hand flat against the wall. Mary instructed urgently, and Lex obeyed, not wasting time on questions. To his great delight, as soon as he did so a blue light formed on the wall and he ran through. As soon as he crossed he turned his attention to listen to the sounds outside. The lion and giant zombie seemed to pass right beside the building and crossed it. Lex waited a few more moments to ensure they had passed. When he was assured he asked the monocle how to lock the door and followed the instructions, after which he took a look around the room to see if there were any zombies. The room appeared to have been a lounge once. Sofas were arranged neatly around a table and various decorations filled the room. A few plants that had seemed to have overgrown let out a soft, green light, illuminating the room, creating a pleasant environment. Lex, however, had no time to appreciate any of that. When he finally found there were no zombies he collapsed onto the nearest couch. He was thoroughly exhausted. He had lost all his supplies and his clothes had been ripped to the point that he was practically nude. Without thinking too much, he pulled out the second bottle of Botlam Dew from the system and moved his aching hand to deliver it to his mouth, a simple action that had suddenly become immensely painful as soon as he let himself relax. Once he drank the bottle, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. He was completely mentally and physically exhausted. He did not know it, but he had spent nearly 3 hours continuously fighting zombies. His body was completely black and blue, and his originally pristine and flawless skin could not be differentiated from an old piece of beaten leather. If he had known how bad his condition really was, he would have panicked, but the last time he had checked his body, the zombies had been unable to pierce his skin, so he thought he was still safe. If he had known how many scratches his body had sustained, he would have assumed that he was infected. Which he was, for a short time, but a closer examination of his wounds would show tiny droplets of Botlam Dew killing off even tinier black, wriggling spores. Unwittingly, he had saved himself. Even Mary did not notice, as she was not able to view the status of his body. She just appeared in the air and watched him sleep, worry painted across her tiny face. "You can't die, not yet," she whispered, her thoughts completely unknown. Chapter 25 Epiphany. When Lex finally woke, the first thing he became aware of was pain. His entire body, from his toes to his head, was filled with pain. He was also incredibly sore, and that was a feeling he had barely felt since he started cultivating regal embrace. With difficulty he got up, and all his bones cracked as he did. When he got up, he was hit with a sudden bout of nausea and leaned to the side of the sofa to let out pitch-black vomit. Lex was horrified looking at it, but he suddenly felt much better once he was done. Other than the constant pain, the soreness and the weakness that filled his entire being, Lex felt pretty great. Shaking his head, he got up and moved to a different corner of the room to get away from the smell. He looked at his completely bruised, almost bare body and was honestly impressed. Not a single cut was visible. Regal Embrace really lived up to its claim of having the best defense in the universe, even at this level. Previously, when he had Botlam Dew, it had almost completely healed and reinvigorated him, compared to this time when he was clearly still pretty badly hurt. It was a testament to how miserable his condition must have been. He opened up the system to buy another bottle of Botlam Dew but froze when he saw the list of notifications. Quest completed, 2020 zombies killed. Quest reward, 1000 MP delivered. Quest updated, kill 50 zombies before returning to inn. Quest reward, 1500 MP. Quest completed, 50 zombies killed. Quest reward, 1500 MP delivered. Quest updated, kill 100 zombies before returning to inn. Quest reward, 2000 MP. Quest completed, 100 out of 100 zombies killed. Quest reward, 2000 MP delivered. Quest updated, kill 5 rank 2 zombies before returning to inn. Quest reward, 5000 MP. Quest status, rank 2 zombies killed. He read the notifications multiple times before he could accept what was written. He had unwittingly earned 4500 MP, and that was amazing. But he had killed over 100 zombies? Honestly, he didn't even recall what happened. When he thought back, he could only remember flashes. He remembered feeling sweaty, he remembered feeling pain from being hit, he remembered feeling that his body was extremely hot. At some point, he was on top of a car. He had lost track of his backpack, his knife, and most of his clothes. He vaguely remembered telling the monocle if it could figure out how the blue light doors worked when it saw zombies coming out of buildings, and at some point it must have done that. He remembered the giant lion running? He remembered Mary's warning. "Mary, are you there?" he croaked. His throat was very dry and his voice was barely audible. "I'm here," she said, appearing in front of him. She was floating in the air before him, looking down at his beaten body with sympathy. "You did really well. Who could have guessed your first trip to another world would be so dangerous?" Lex chuckled. He had anticipated many things when he thought of what he could encounter on another planet: hostile civilizations, primitive life forms, aliens, but he never considered zombies. "How much time is left before I can leave?" he asked her, this time using his thoughts. "It's been 21 hours since you've been on his planet. 3 more hours before the minimum time required, and it could be any amount of time after that. I suggest you get as much rest as you can, in case it takes much longer. You've lost your food, so if it takes much longer than 24 hours for you to be able to go back, you might have to think of something. If I can continue hiding, I'll just buy Saturn cake from the midnight store. It's expensive, but I'm in no condition to continue fighting. Anyway, I've earned quite a few MP. Did I really kill that many zombies?" For a moment Mary just looked at Lex with a complicated expression on her face. "You killed quite a few zombies, but you've overexerted yourself. You lost yourself in combat, which was very dangerous. You could have easily escaped much earlier, but you were so focused on fighting that you completely forgot about everything else. In the future, try to maintain your self-awareness at all times. Lex was startled. He was under the impression that he had done really well, but Mary's lecture reminded him that his primary purpose wasn't to kill zombies. He should have only fought as long as needed. Instead, he got caught up in a cycle of acting without thinking because the situation was too intense. As a result, he was not thoroughly exhausted. "I'll keep that in mind," he said as he moved to buy another botlamdu finally, but right before he made the purchase he had an idea. He had an idea for how to solve another problem he had been having. "Mary, how do I recruit Marlowe as a valet?" he asked. "You can purchase an employment key from the Midnight store. It's a platinum key you can give to someone, who can then use it to enter Midnight Inn. There they can view an employee contract that details their responsibilities, based on their job, and if they accept they will become your employee. You must also give them a test to complete before they can officially join, as becoming an employee of the Midnight Inn should not be a leisurely task. Once you have an employee you will also have to provide them with an employee residence. The employee can choose to live in the residence permanently or travel back and forth between their world and the inn, but either way they must have one. The employee can also never harm you, in any world, but you can also not harm an employee or ask them to perform a task that will kill them. You can only give them orders related to the position they are filling, and anything else you tell them to do will be a request that they can turn down if they so wish. You also have to pay the employee an MP, and their salary will be based on their cultivation level as well as position and result during the test. If you are unable to pay your employee at the end of every month the system will instantly kill you. There is no such thing as credit when it comes to the system. Right now you only have basic positions open to fill, such as valet, but later on you can recruit better and more skilled employees such as pill refiners, blacksmiths, spirit array refiners and more to provide the best services to your guests. Lex understood the basics, and it was more or less as he expected it to be. Slowly a plan formed in his mind, but enacting the plan would depend on when he would be able to return to the inn. He closed his eyes and rested while he waited for the last 3 hours to pass. Normally his body was very quick to recover since he cultivated regal embrace. This was the first time his feeling of weakness persisted. He checked his status mentally and was shocked at the state his body was in, especially since this was after he had drunk botlamdu. Name, Lex Williams. Age, 23. Sex, male. Cultivation level, regal embrace body tempering stage 1. Health, suboptimal, developing brain tumor, severe muscle damage, recovering, severe exhaustion, recovering, multiple hairline fractures, recovering. Midnight points, 5331. Midnight in level, 2. Inventory, bathroom slippers, self-defense butter knife, 1 golden tickets, host attire. Quests. New quest, as the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Remark, keep working hard. If you raise your cultivation high enough, one day you'll be able to cast illusions to make yourself look better. Sudden quest, with a great personality and abundant energy, Marlowe is a great candidate to serve as a valet for the inn. Hire Marlowe as your first valet. Quest time limit, 1 month. Quest reward, 1 small staff dormitory, 1000 MP, plus 1 midnight in level. Quest failure punishment, -1000 MP, if host is unable to pay, it will result in immediate death. Lex rested with his eyes closed, though he was not able to fall asleep due to the pain. He waited patiently for his 24 hours to be complete, and prayed for the inn to connect the worlds as soon as possible. Fortunately, his luck was good and he got the notification. Midnight Inn update, World Vegas Minima connected. Access available. Quests completed before connection, 3. Rating, C. Host reward, Serene Whistle, Trials. Lex didn't have the patience to go through his reward right now, he was in too much pain for goodness sakes. He could tolerate it if he had to, but he had no intentions of prolonging it. He quickly left Vegas Minima and returned to Earth. He threw on some random clothes and hailed a cab to Marlowe's apartment. He did his best to make himself look as miserable as possible, which wasn't very hard to be honest as he was still covered in dried black blood from the zombies and smelled like death. He rang the bell for Marlowe's apartment and when the butler answered the door he gave one look at Lex and delivered an annoyed look rather than a surprised one. "I will summon the master," the butler said, escorting Lex to the least luxurious part of the apartment, a bathroom. Marlowe appeared quick enough and his face was plastered with the largest grin Lex had ever seen, and his eyes were practically screaming with excitement. "I had an epiphany about self-defense," Lex said weakly as he chuckled. "Giving up an opportunity that's too dangerous for you is also a form of self-defense." Before he could explain further the behemoth of a man before him burst into a roaring laughter. Chapter 26 Platinum Key. Lex found himself lying on his back on an observation table in nothing but his undergarments. Marlowe, after his usual outburst, had Lex brought to a first aid room that he had in his apartment. As if everything was very routine, two female nurses entered the room and began Lex's examination using various spirit tech. In a few minutes Marlowe had a full report and was reading through it very seriously, though every time he saw something interesting he gave Lex a wide grin. "Took quite the beating, didn't you?" Marlowe asked, his voice normal level for once. "According to your cell activity, your body has already been healing for quite a while, and at an accelerated pace." "Yeah, I took something quite expensive for that," Lex said, his voice still hoarse. "Which basically means you were beaten up in even worse shape than you're in right now. And yet you made it back alive." Marlowe gave Lex a wide grin and looked at him as if he were a parent looking down with pride at his child. "What about the other guy? Did he make it? I must warn you, if your enemy is alive you should prepare for retaliation. The other guys are all dead. No one will be coming after me." Lex closed his eyes as he felt relief. There was no chance he would be going back to Vegas Minima anytime soon. Not until he was much, much more powerful. Not bad, Marlowe commented, as if it were the most natural thing to kill off one's enemies. "So if you don't need my help hiding from your enemies, what brought you to my doorstep I wonder?" Marlowe's voice was unusually stable throughout all of this, which told Lex how seriously he was taking this. Now was the moment of truth. Lex had to be convincing, and for the most part he didn't have to lie. However, whether he could complete his quest to recruit Marlowe would depend a lot on how the next few minutes went. He stayed quiet, lying there for a while. His expression changed quite a few times, from anxiety to anger to relief to reluctance. It appeared as though he was struggling quite a bit with what he was thinking. Ultimately, his expression calmed down and he let out a sigh. "I did some research on you. You have a pretty good reputation, and all your students praise you quite a bit. Everyone who has worked with you has said positive things. If it weren't so, I wouldn't have had the guts to come to you with this. Otherwise who knows, I might have come to you for your help but ended up losing my life instead." Marlowe looked at the young man with an amused smile, but said nothing. There was another short silence before Lex continued. "I had no background for cultivation, and no knowledge of it either. That is, until I encountered something quite magical." He raised his empty hand and showed Marlowe, yet when he spun it once a beautiful, platinum key appeared in his hand. The key was not shining or glowing or anything of the sort to show it was special, yet just lying there in Lex's hand it had gripped all of Marlowe's attention. He could instinctively feel that the key was not at all normal, and his instincts were telling him that he must have it. An old wound in his body, a testament to a time long past, started aching again, as if hinting that the key was important to it. Marlowe's smile completely disappeared and he looked at the key with extreme seriousness, yet he made no move. He was waiting for Lex to continue speaking. "The key can take you someplace magical. Over there I encountered someone who gave me tests. If I passed the tests I could be rewarded, but if I failed chances were high that I would straight up die. At first, I thought I could still complete them." Lex looked at the key with reluctance and longing. "But I know now that I can't. So long as I have the key I'll be tempted, and next time I might not be lucky enough to survive." He held the key out to Marlowe, as if indicating him to take it. "I can sell it to you, if you're interested." Marlowe did not reply immediately, but instead kept staring at the key. Now it was his turn to have various expressions show on his face, though in his case it was only a change from serious to mad grin and back. "How do you know you can trust me? What if I kill you and take the key directly? Did you ever think about that? No one can give me a bad review if everyone who thinks negatively is dead." Lex chuckled, as if he had predicted the question. "Of course I have, and I have already taken precautions. If I wasn't sure about getting out alive, would I come here especially in such a beaten state?" In fact, Lex had made no preparations. From the moment the inn had judged Marlowe to be a good fit as a valet, Lex had dropped his guard against the man. Not to mention, Lex had looked him up on the Bluebird portal, and he did in fact have a stellar reputation. Marlowe nodded his head, and his grin grew wider as if he was proud to hear that answer. "What do you want for it, and what does it do exactly?" "When you crush the key you will be taken to a different place where someone will give you a test. If you pass the test you get a reward, if you fail but survive you get sent back. I've already been there twice, the first time I got my cultivation technique and this time, well let's say it will soon be worth the trip. But this is my limit, I know it. The only reason I survived this time was because of luck, nothing else. It's very hard for me to admit it, but I know I can't pass the next test. And it won't matter if I wait and raise my cultivation to go back, the test changes according to your cultivation. Having a higher or lower level makes no difference. So long as I keep the key, I know I won't be able to resist using it, and will most likely die. Better to realize the truth right now and take whatever benefit I can, rather than blindly chasing an unreachable dream. Marlowe nodded, as if appreciating Lex's thoughts. Knowing your limits was important. You can have the key for $50 million, as well as a weapon suitable for me. I know the price sounds high, but it's worth it. Lex had purposefully asked for a steep price. He had to give the impression that he really valued the key, and that he was very reluctant to give it up. Little did he know that his price seemed paltry to Marlowe. Who could blame him? Lex had very little experience in the cultivation world and did not fully understand what little value money had. Furthermore, he could not feel the attraction the key had towards other cultivators. To him it was just a key, to others it was an unbearable enticement. Still, Marlowe did not respond immediately. He sat beside Lex and alternated between staring at the key and Lex. Though he wore the most remarkable poker face Lex had ever seen, Lex could not tell what he was thinking at all. Finally, after about 15 minutes of deliberation, Marlowe spoke. You are both very wise, and very naïve. This remark caught Lex by surprise. Your wisdom is in recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, your naivety is in assuming you understand the world and its complexities. You will of course only find positive reviews of me online, because most people who thought differently are already dead. Marlowe chuckled, and patted Lex on the back, the strength of it shaking him to the core. Like how the cultivation world was hidden from the mortal world, the real face of the cultivation world is hidden from most cultivators as well. Unless your strength rises to a certain level, or you have a very powerful background, it's impossible for you to see the truth. Without seeing and knowing the truth, it's impossible for you to judge the real danger in a situation. You think you can trust me and trade with me, and have backups prepared in case things go wrong. You think you are in control of the situation, but the truth is your entire existence is dependent on a whim of mine. Even if I try to attack you, and you escape, a simple bounty from me and I can have your entire family in my hands. It wouldn't even take more than a few hours. Lex's expression changed, and he stared at the giant warily. It was true, he made a very simple yet obvious mistake. He did not take into account that his family could be threatened. He still didn't doubt Marlowe, since the system thought he would be a good valet. Then Lex didn't doubt Marlowe's character. Yet this was a good reminder that in the future anything he does, he would need to take his family's safety into account as well. Take this as another lesson in self-defense, the giant said, getting back up and then staring down at Lex. I will give you an option. I can accept your offer, and pay you the money as well as the weapon, or I can forego both of those but bring you into contact with the true face of the cultivation world. I cannot say if knowing this will necessarily bring you any benefits, that depends on many things, but at least you won't be caught unaware. Lex thought for a second, but he already knew what he was going to answer. Chapter 27 Schemes. Lex groaned as the taxi hit a bump on the road. Marlowe had given some painkillers which made him mostly numb, but any sudden movement would bring back his pain. He was already on his way back home now, having given the giant hulking man his answer. What could he have chosen? The $50 million, of course. Lex grinned to himself, despite the pain. What truth of the cultivation world, what hidden secrets? He had Earth's most powerful beings as guests at his inn, a much better source of information than Marlowe. Furthermore, since Earth was his home, he had decided that he was going to stay as low-key as possible. He didn't want to attract any kind of attention at all, and having Marlowe introduce him to the greater secrets of the cultivation world would probably attract some kind of attention down the road. Lex suddenly frowned. A thought occurred to him. Marlowe giving him this option might have actually been a trap to test him. On the one hand, he was saying that he was giving up a great opportunity so that he could ensure his security, but if he jumped at the chance to learn more secrets, then that might not be in line with the mentality of someone trying to stay safe. It would only tempt someone who had hidden motives and was looking for benefits. Luckily, he hadn't hesitated much and chosen to take the money and weapon. Marlowe would wire him the money in a few days. Even if it was a small amount. For cultivators, they had to be smart about their money and expenses to avoid paying endless taxes and fees. And as for the weapon, Lex told him to wait for a bit. Lex needed to decide what kind of weapon suited him. This was no cultivation novel, this was real life. The romance between a man and his sword might sound appealing on paper, but it might not be the best at serving his needs. He had to be smart about it. Either way, all of that was for later. For now he just wanted to get home and sleep. After seeing Lex off, Marlowe returned to his apartment and sat in his lounge in a somber mood. He stared at the key in his hand gravely, and felt the warmth it gave off. In the short time he had the key in his possession, he could feel it somehow heal him. Marlowe wasn't a simple man, and he had faced far more dangers than the few stories he had told his students. His body carried numerous injuries, many of which would take years to heal, and one specific one that was impossible to heal. Yet now, with the platinum key in hand, he could feel that recovery wasn't actually impossible. The amount that the key healed him, however, was minuscule. As a smart man, he deduced instantly that the purpose wasn't to actually heal him, but to let him know that the key presented him with the opportunity to heal. Taking that opportunity was up to him. Marlowe let out a low, withdrawn sigh. Initially this was just an assignment for him, and he didn't carry any more interest in it than any other assignment he had. Now, however, he was completely invested. Making up his mind, he dialed a number on his phone, and when the call was answered, a projector in his room turned on and a realistic hologram of his foster mother appeared before him. There's been progress on the assignment. The subject has delivered the source of his fortuitous encounter to me, and given me a brief description of what it entails. The woman raised an eyebrow, and for a moment a surprised expression appeared on her face, but her indifference soon returned. That was faster than anticipated. We have only just begun the subconscious suggestion program, and even the mental resistance dampener talismans have not been installed around his apartment. Why would he just give you the source? I do not believe you could have created such a strong relationship with him so quickly. No, I haven't given him any special preference in classes, and our relationship is not too extraordinary. I believe he was influenced by the data you manipulated on the Bluebird portal, not that any of it was a lie, but he seems to have adopted a good impression of me. He gave me the source as he believed it was too dangerous for him, and that he could no longer profit from it, and instead he would be harmed by it. He sold it to me for 50 million, along with a weapon for himself. Based on his actions of signing up for a self-defense class, I believe his self-preservation tendencies are real, and his action of giving up the source for more immediate profit is in line with his personality, and is not some sort of scheme or diversion. He is decisive and knows his limits. If he is an ally, he should be strongly supported. If he is an enemy, he should be influenced now whilst he is weak so that his stance changes. The woman nodded, accepting her foster son's report. Stay online, I have already reported the mission complete status. You will be required to give a more detailed report soon. I'm a little confused, Marlowe spoke, relaxing a bit. What's so special about him that you reached out to me the moment he registered for my class? Or is his fortuitous encounter so special that it would require such a large operation? The woman was silent for a moment as she looked at her son. Their relationship was more of a business venture than familial. Their family had adopted Marlowe when he showed potential as a young child, and had given him numerous resources to nurture him. He had, in return, helped them a lot in dealing with various difficult situations. Lately, however, they rarely asked him for assistance or to do missions, as he had grown a lot in strength and influence in his own right. It would not suit his status if he was still treated as someone to run errands, which is exactly why this assignment seemed peculiar. His task was to build a positive relationship with Lex and try to learn about how he entered onto the path of cultivation in as much detail as possible. That was it. The only condition was that he should not use force or try to make his attempts obvious. As fate would have it, Lex gave him the source directly and fulfilled his mission. Little did he know that Lex's actions were influenced by the system's quest and not any manipulation on his family's part. Finally she said, "Even I don't know. This was a mission someone assigned directly to the family head. We had no right to refuse." Suddenly Marlowe sat upright, his expression a lot more serious. He knew it, this could not have been simple. How could this key, that could allow him to heal his wounds, be simple? Before he could ask more questions though, another projection appeared in front of him, a young, delicate-looking girl. If Lex saw her, he would be extremely surprised, as it was his younger sister, Liz. She was the same little girl who had been told to investigate the situation by the monstrously strong man practicing the sword. That was quite fast, she noted. I expected a few months at least before any progress was made. I hope you were subtle in your investigations. The last sentence carried a hint of a threat in it, though she was not looking at anyone in particular. Both Marlowe and his foster mother felt the weight behind her words, however, triggered by their honed instincts for danger. Marlowe immediately stood up and reported everything he had just told his mother. He was not familiar with the girl, but clearly she was someone of status. Once she heard everything he had to say, she asked to see the source. Marlowe presented the platinum key before him for the girl to observe. Unexpectedly, however, the projection moved forward and picked it up. Projections interacting with physical objects? This was beyond any technology Marlowe knew of. She was staring at it from every angle before asking, "You said this can teleport a person to an inheritance land? Have you tried it?" "Not yet," Marlowe reported, fidgeting. He was surprised that a hologram could interact with the real world, but he took it in his stride as he had seen many strange things in his life. The only thing was that he was hoping the young girl would not notice the key's peculiarity, as he was very interested in it. Luckily, after observing it for a while, the girl returned the key. "You can keep it. Maintain contact with the target, and if you learn anything of interest report it back. Don't, however, Give him any preference beyond what your current relationship would entail, she said succinctly before her hologram disappeared. His mother, after a short chat, disappeared as well. Marlowe was left alone in his lounge with the key, and suddenly all his prior strict demeanor vanished. His face was painted with a massive grin, and he eventually erupted out in a roaring, manic laughter as he gripped the key tightly in his hand. Liz walked towards her mother's office with a clipboard in her hand, mumbling as she scribbled on the document in front of her. When she entered, she saw her mother slowly practicing a fist technique. Beside her stood her assistant, making a report of various things and noting down comments. The investigation has results, Liz interrupted, knowing full well that it would probably be hours before anyone noticed her unless she interrupted them. Big Bro encountered a grade C inheritance item with spatial properties, but he's already given it up. Even if he didn't give it up, and got the key inheritance, with the conditions on Earth it would be impossible for him to make much progress. There is no evidence of outside interference in his life so far. Very well, in that case we will maintain our prior arrangements, replied Serene, her mother. Liz hesitated, confusion apparent on her face. Since he's already started cultivating, shouldn't we just let him know? No, as long as there is no outside interference your father wants to keep things the same. Liz hesitated once again, something clearly on her mind but unsure if she should say it. Eventually, she said, but you know your brother's temperament. If you just tell him, he will support elder sister Belle Anne. It doesn't matter. Your father wants to go according to the original plan. We will tell him when he turns 50. For a cultivator a few years here or there won't make a difference. You girls are young, which is why you're impatient. Let things progress naturally, and instead focus on your studies. Prima Ventura has shown an interest in recruiting you early, but it still depends on your upcoming results. Liz groaned and the sudden reminder, and all thoughts of her brother were blown out of her mind. Whether it was on Earth or out in the universe, the most insidious evil was always homework. Chapter 28 Realization of Truth. Lex got home and the first thing he did was chug another bottle of Botlam Dew and throw himself in bed. He slept for nearly 12 hours and woke up disoriented and in pain, and extremely hungry. Wiping the drool from his face, Lex grabbed his phone to check for notifications, and maybe order a lot of home delivery. He knew how to cook, but you couldn't expect an injured man to cook, right? That was totally the reason. Unfortunately, he did not get the notification for the money from Marlowe yet, which was expected. He did however have countless missed calls and messages from Harry and Elaine, his former coworkers and friends. He had completely forgotten to contact them and it had been a while since he quit as well. He sent both of them a message saying he'd gotten an exciting new job, which is why he had been extremely busy, and would reach out to them soon to catch up. He felt a tinge of guilt lying to them. They had accompanied him through many things, but for now safety was all that mattered. Once he stabilized things and was at a higher cultivation level, who knows, maybe he would introduce them to the world of cultivation as well. Groaning, he got out of bed and limped to the bathroom. He removed his clothes and stood in front of the mirror and grimaced at his condition. He wasn't black and blue all over like when he had just returned, but his entire body was still covered in bruises. He pulled up his status to get a better understanding. Name, Lex Williams. Age, 23. Sex, male. Cultivation level, Regal Embrace Body Tempering Stage 1. Health, suboptimal, developing brain tumor, serious muscle damage, recovering, serious exhaustion, recovering, multiple hairline fractures, recovering, vitality overdrawn, recovering, spirit drained, recovering, soul slightly damaged, recovering. Midnight points, 5151. Midnight in level, 2. Inventory, bathroom slippers, self-defense butter knife, 1 golden tickets, host attire, serene whistle. Midnight events available, trials. Quests. New quest, as the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Remark, keep working hard. If you raise your cultivation high enough, one day you'll be able to cast illusions to make yourself look better. Sudden quest initiated. With a great personality and abundant energy, Marlowe is a great candidate to serve as a valet for the inn. Hire Marlowe as your first valet. Quest time limit, 1 month. Quest reward, 1 small staff dormitory, 1000 MP, plus 1 midnight in level. Quest failure punishment, -1000 MP, if host is unable to pay, it will result in immediate death. Lex was slightly alarmed when he saw the new ailments in his status affecting his vitality, spirit and soul, and completely missed the rest of his status. Mary, what is going on? How did my soul and spirit get damaged? And what does it mean when it says vitality overdrawn? Maybe you can check your status history to figure out when your spirit and vitality were hurt. As for vitality, I can tell you that it was probably also hurt during your fight with the zombies. When a normal person gets hurt, their body recovers for them, and the same is true for cultivators. When a person gets hurt to an extent that they cannot heal even with the use of medicine on the same tier, their vitality gets hurt. At that point, for a person to recover, a medicine above their cultivation tier must be used to first treat their vitality to allow their body to heal. Your body was probably hurt beyond its capacity during your fight with the zombies, but you used Botlamdu, which can heal those below the foundation realm, which is what probably helped you recover. Lex got chills when he heard the news, and quickly went over his status history to determine what affected his spirit and soul. Quickly he found the answer, and it sent further chills down his spine. The status read: Received cut by Tier 1 zombie, infected by mutagen. Body resisting mutagen X7. Received cut by Tier 2 zombie, infected by mutagen. Body unable to resist, mutagen multiplying X2. Mutagen affecting spirit X8. Mutagen altering soul X4. Botlamdu absorbed in blood. Botlamdu purifying mutagen, spirit and soul returning to normal X3. Thank the holy system for Botlamdu. Lex chanted in his heart, and finally realized how close to his demise he really came. But, he also learnt something incredible. Botlamdu could purify the zombie mutagens, which meant that at least the zombies he encountered weren't like the ones he'd seen in movies that didn't give the victim any chance to resist. Another thing was that the transformation wasn't instant, so a victim would have time to treat himself. Well, no point in stressing himself out further over the fact. The situation had already been remedied, so better to focus on the future for now. Lex took a long, warm shower, washing off a lot of dried blood and dirt from his body, and returned to his living room just in time to collect the ridiculous amounts of barbecue that he'd ordered. Several drinks and an entire cow's worth of meat later, Lex decided to relax for a bit before tending to the inn. Too much work wasn't good for a boy's soul. In commemoration of his recent accolades, he decided to play a zombie game. He turned on his PC, chose a game and started playing. At first when he started playing he felt a little uncomfortable. The game was too rigid, it didn't match his experience. Furthermore, the more he played the more he felt like he would rather be training so that he'd be able to handle the situation a bit better the next time he faced them. Just as he was about to quit the game, his character in the game did a certain action, and like a bulb turning on, Lex felt like he'd gotten an amazing idea. He made his character repeat the action, and the more he did it, the more he felt that his idea was amazing. He had an epiphany and suddenly he felt clear-headed. He realized that he had been confused, but didn't even know it himself. He had been deluded and had somehow gone down the wrong path when it came to combat, but fortunately he had come to realize the truth. He played for a few more hours to confirm his idea, and the more he played the more he felt that he was an unprecedented genius. Somehow, without realizing it, he had been influenced by some preconceived notions he had about combat, but he had finally broken free of those chains. That got him thinking, if he had been affected by false notions in terms of combat, what else had he overlooked? Since video games had liberated his mindset, he turned to the arts to free himself further. To get some ideas for what he should do with the inn, he pulled out his phone and searched for the most popular cultivation novel these days. He found one and started reading, and what a book it was. The main character, who had been abandoned at birth and raised by his distant family, was severely ousted at every opportunity and treated horribly. Every single person he ever met hated him beyond comprehension and went out of their way, so far as to even inconvenience themselves, to harm the main character. However, as the main character, the young boy of 15 had stellar morals and never needlessly harmed others and never hated anyone and always helped anyone he saw, because somehow surrounded by all that negativity the inner morals of the MC could never be corrupted. The only person who was decent to him was his adopted sister, who he had found as a child and raised himself even though he himself was a child. She was devastatingly beautiful to the point where anyone born before or after would never again be as beautiful, but somehow no one other than the main character ever noticed because her clothes and her face were covered by a little dirt because they used to do manual labor. She was also in love with him because apparently it's mandatory in cultivation novels for adopted siblings to either betray one another, or fall in love with one another. One day this group of people tore through the fabric of space and time and appeared in front of the main character and beat him up for no good reason. Then they spent several paragraphs insulting him. Then they beat him up some more. When they stopped, the main character's sister somehow found them and lurched at them to stop them, but she was caught. It turned out those cultivators had descended to the mortal plane because the saintess of their family had somehow gotten lost and they were finding her, and the main character's adopted sister turned out to be the saintess. Happy that they found her, they decided to kill the main character because how dare he take care of her and raise her, causing her to have feelings for him? The saintess sister threatened suicide if they harmed him, but agreed to go with them if they spared him. The group agreed and spared him, but little did everyone know as they left, instead of killing the main character they decided to blow up the whole world he was in. That way they wouldn't technically be directly killing him, thus not breaking their promise to the saint's sister, who at this point had been recognized to be so beautiful the universe itself was crying in admiration, because the little bit of dirt on her face had at some point fallen off. When the world was destroyed and as the MC was about to die, his heart was filled with hate and sorrow, for he didn't hate those guys for killing him but rather all those innocent people in the world who had also died, the same people who had been insulting him his whole life. This was because he had a heart of pure gold. In the moment before his death a treasure that his mysterious parents had left him started to glow, and saved him, granting him a second chance at life and cultivation. All of this happened in the first chapter of the novel Lex decided to read. Honestly, he was impressed by the word count to cliché ratio the novel had achieved. Nonetheless, it did give him an idea. In most novels he'd read previously, the MC goes out of his way to collect rare opportunities and treasures that could help him grow. But as the owner of the inn, he had access to several worlds, not just one. He could collect treasures from all over the universe and make them available at the inn, thus making the inn even more luxurious. Such an amazing idea. Where else could he find inspiration? He opened up his computer and started listening to the latest songs, trying to see if the lyrics inspired him some more. In the background Mary was floating in the air and watching Lex with a stupefied and irritated look. Whatever, she would ignore him for now. His spirit was damaged, which affected how he thought. Once his spirit recovered, so would his sanity. She hoped. Chapter 29 New Guests. Somewhere upstate New York in a mansion an old man sat in a meditation stance, holding a golden key in his hand trying to absorb spirit energy. The key would allow spirit energy to enter his body, and even pass through the meridians, but none of it was absorbed. It was like a teasing sensation, one that dangled his greatest desires in front of him, but kept them out of reach. Will let out a defeated sigh as he finally gave up. It was obvious to him, the key was whispering to him that it held the possibility that he yearned for, but to grasp it the old man would have to use the key instead of trying to derive benefits from it directly. But did he have the courage to use it? He could barely walk on his own, much less face any difficulties, so it was impossible for him to use the key and search for opportunities. But who could he trust to use the key for him and search for opportunities on his behalf? His niece, who he got the key from, was not a cultivator, otherwise he would trust her enough to do this for him. The old man had children of his own, but honestly he did not trust their competence. They'd grown up privileged and sheltered, akin to a plant in a greenhouse. Even if it was their intention to help him, he could not rely on their competence. He could hire someone, but how trustworthy was a hired hand when it came to treasure? Truly a conundrum, and one he had to solve if he ever wanted to recover his former cultivation. The old man sighed again, and called for a nurse to help him. There was one trick he could use to resolve the situation, but he did not want to use it unless he had no choice, for it would truly put him on death's door. Somewhere on Vegas Minima, two soldiers were running desperately through a forest. For someone at their cultivation level of peak chi training it was unusual for them to be so out of sorts, but it was apparent from their appearance that they had just been through a fight. Something peculiar about them though was the fact that they were covered in flashlights and bells. As they ran they made endless noise and attracted all the zombies in the area. They were on a suicide mission. As far as weapons were concerned, they both only carried a single sword and an explosive each. The sword was for fighting and the explosive was for when they could no longer fight. Their mission was to attract as many zombies as possible so that the caravan they were with could safely pass through. They used to all belong to a small, safe town protected by a resonance shield. But of all things an earthquake occurred and caused the building with the resonance shield to collapse. The town was no longer safe and they had to migrate immediately, and today was already their third day since they started their migration. These two soldiers were not the first suicide party that had set out, and it was the bravery of these suicide parties that allowed the caravan to travel relatively undetected by zombie hordes. "Brother Chen, we have to set off the first explosive soon," said one of the soldiers between ragged breaths. "If we get too far from the zombies we run the risk of losing their attention. We can use the noise from the explosion to attract their attention again." "You're right, we should," replied Brother Chen, finally coming to a stop. A close inspection of the man would show that he was bleeding from his shoulder and chest, where he was covered in scratches. They both knew what that meant, but neither mentioned it. It was not like they carried the illusion of escape in the first place. "I'll do it," said Chen in a matter-of-fact way. "Help me tie these torches onto this tree, and then get as far as you can. I'll set it off when the horde approaches." The other soldier only nodded, accepting what Brother Chen told and got to work. What the two of them didn't know was that a short distance from them stood a tall, pole-like zombie. It had undergone some mutations and grown to 9 feet tall and was incredibly sleek, with claws that extended a foot long and teeth that barely fit in its mouth. It also had two horns protruding from its head. It observed the two soldiers work in silence. It analyzed their strength and condition, and then smiled when it realized that they were incredibly weak compared to it. Making no attempt to hide, it strode forward. The sound of the zombie crossing through the thicket attracted the soldiers' attention, horrifying them when they noticed the zombie. A peak tier 3 zombie. Brother Chen shrieked. The zombie made a grunting sound, as if enjoying their apparent panic, and slowed down its approach instead to savor their reaction. The zombie as well as the soldiers knew that the soldiers would not be able to escape. Brother Chen, if this zombie finds the caravan no one will survive, said the soldier as he took out the explosive he was carrying. There was no need to deliberate, they knew what they had to do. Brother Chen took out his explosive as well, his hands trembling a little from the adrenaline. Even though he knew they were going to die, at the moment of his death he still felt fear in his heart. The fear did not slow his actions, but he felt it nonetheless. Throw it when it reaches 10 feet, Brother Chen whispered. If we wait any longer, we might not get an opportunity to use it at all. The soldier nodded, getting ready, but before either of them could do anything a floating golden door appeared beside them, shining brilliantly. The soldiers froze in confusion, and so did the zombie. The zombie felt a fatal attraction from the door, and lost all interest in the two soldiers. Moving as fast as it could, it attacked the two soldiers, instantly knocking them to the ground. Whether they were dead or alive was unknown. Then, with eyes filled with anticipation, the zombie moved towards the door. It dragged the two soldiers behind it, not forgetting to bring along its snack. It was 4 a.m. and Lex was asleep on his sofa. In front of him his television played some random TV shows. Truth be told, although Lex had not noticed it, the sudden stress and anxiety from such a sudden near-death experience, as well as the battered state of his body really did affect him strongly. Fortunately, after a day of venting his emotions by playing games, watching TV and reading novels, as well as the recovery effects of Botlamdu, he had stabilized his drained mental state. "Wake up," roared Mary suddenly, appearing before him in the air. "The inn has new guests coming in, as well as a potential enemy." Mary's roar scared Lex into jumping out of bed and grabbing a pillow, holding it close to himself as a self-defense item as his brain worked overtime to understand what was happening. He was drowsy and confused, still unsure of what was going on. A zombie from Vegas Minima has entered the inn through a golden door. "You need to handle it quickly," informed Mary, making Lex aware of the situation. Immediately, Lex gathered himself and began the process to return to the inn, using the few minutes wait to fully wake up. Not being able to return to the inn instantly was a real hindrance. It seemed Lex had to focus on completing his quests quickly so that he could raise his authority level. The moment he reappeared at the inn he adorned the host attire and equipped the butter knife, appearing before the zombie that had appeared at the gate. It stood there in silence, observing its new surroundings, with two limp bodies in its hands. Lex was tempted to directly attack the zombie and kill it, but as it had not yet shown any aggression the system categorized it as a guest and did not allow Lex to attack. Above the zombie its information was clearly visible to Lex. Name, none. Power level, peak tier, 3, equivalent to peak foundation realm. Species, zombie, bottom level demon. Midnight and prestige level, not yet available. Internally Lex breathed a sigh of relief as even a peak foundation realm was still in the foundation realm, the self-defense butter knife would still be able to handle it. This guest, it's a bit rude to show up somewhere with two bloody bodies at someone's door, don't you think, said Lex as he approached the zombie. He had no idea if the zombie could understand him, but it didn't matter as his only goal was to agitate the zombie into action. Fortunately Batet and Phallic were still in their rooms, which were isolated from the rest of the inn once the doors closed, so they did not have to witness the zombie. He didn't want to discriminate against his guests, but he thought having zombies as guests would lower the prestige of the inn, and he absolutely had to maintain the prestige of the inn. He was depending on it to build a relationship with Batet, and that was a very important part of his future plan. Fortunately, his plan worked. Though even if he had not said anything the zombie would have acted soon. The moment Lex appeared in front of the zombie its instincts were screaming at it that if it managed to eat Lex it would benefit greatly. Completely dropping the two bodies on the ground it let out a roar and launched itself towards Lex. A pity for the zombie, while with his normal cultivation Lex would never be able to keep up with it, he was currently wearing the host attire which filled him with immense power. With a wave of his hand he launched the butter knife at the zombie, and literally as if it were a hot knife cutting through butter the knife pierced the zombie's forehead and came out the other side. The zombie dropped dead immediately, bringing the minor ordeal to a very anticlimactic end. "Clean this up, Gerard," Lex spoke out into the air, and the old-looking butler appeared instantly to take care of the matter. Just as Lex was about to leave, Gerard said, "Host, what about these two guests? They are still alive, though they might not be for much longer." With that, Lex brought his attention to the two bodies the zombie had brought with it and came to the realization that the system categorized them as guests as well. 2, almost dead, probably soon to become zombie guests. Author's note: this is the extra chapter you guys unlocked last week. Keep voting to unlock even more extra chapters. Chapter 30 Pro Bono Wing and Recovery Room. Looking at the two bodies, he could clearly identify them as soldiers or guards based on their uniform. Above them their information was available. Name: Chen-Li. Power level: Peak Chi training. Species: human. Midnight and prestige level: not yet available. Name: Blaine Park. Power level: Peak Chi training. Species: human. Midnight and prestige level: not yet available. Initially he thought they were dead, but since they were alive it would be wrong if he just watched them die. It pinched his heart a bit when he thought of the expenditure, but ultimately he decided to buy 2 Botlam Dews as well as the recovery room so that they could heal. He purchased Botlam Dew and asked Gerard to feed it to them, but before he made the purchase of the recovery room Mary appeared before him and stopped him. Using the recovery room costs money as well. If you're planning on using it on them, then you should get the Pro Bono Wing first and accept them as Pro Bono guests, which will make their use of the recovery room free. Lex's eyes lit up when he thought of that, and purchased the Pro Bono Wing as well as the recovery room for a total of 3,000 MP, bringing his total MP down to 1991. Spending so much MP hurt him a little, especially since he needed MP to upgrade his cultivation. But he couldn't spare time to wallow in his worries. It was not good to leave 2 wounded guests out in the open. Entering the design interface, he put the Pro Bono Wing 500 meters to the left of the main inn, and gave it the shape similar to a small cottage from the English countryside. Its interior consisted of a small sitting and dining area right at the entrance, as well as 2 rooms in the back. The recovery room he put in the furthest right of the inn, as a small hut attached to the boundary wall. The recovery room should be far away from the main area of the inn so that any patients would not be disturbed by any guests. Under normal circumstances he would put more effort into designing the 2 new additions, but for now it could all wait. He exited the design interface and directly accepted the 2 as guests in his Pro Bono Wing, then transferred them to the Recover Wing. Summoning Velma, he asked her to take care of them to whatever capacity their status as PB, Pro Bono, guests allowed. Quest update, quest complete. PB Wing established and guest accepted. Calculating rating. Rating, D+. Host reward, 500 MP plus a baby's candy. New quest: having a guest come once can be an accident, only repeat guests can reflect an institution's prestige. Have 5 individual repeat guests. Minimum reward, midnight in prestia. Remark: you can't live off your face only, stop being lazy and put in some work. Lex's lips twitched. This was the lowest reward he'd gotten for a quest, probably because he took too long in completing it. But even if it was a small reward, he was still interested in seeing what a baby's candy was. That reminded him, he hadn't checked out his reward for connecting Vegas Minima either. He opened his inventory and checked it out. A baby's candy. Making a baby like you is as easy as giving it candy. Similarly, getting weaklings to like you is as easy as giving them some benefits. Instantly allows peak body tempering cultivator to break though chi training without any negative influence. Serene whistle. A whistle that placates beasts at Foundation Realm and below during a taming attempt. Repeated use in a short time builds resistance. Midnight events, trials. With access to multiple worlds and a growing inn, the number of tasks for the Innkeeper will increase, but you can't do everything yourself. Create trials for guests to undertake in various worlds with different objectives and rewards to secretly complete tasks you can't do yourself. Both the rewards were nice, but of no use to him at the moment. The trials, on the other hand, was probably one of the most useful things he'd encountered so far. Its potential was amazing, but again, he didn't need it at the moment. He put both the reward items in the gift shop, the candy for 500 MP and the whistle for 1500 MP. His pricing was a little arbitrary, but he eyeballed it based on their use and what cultivation level they corresponded to. A true test of their pricing would be determined when he established more footfall. While he was thinking about pricing, Velma appeared to give him a report. The 2 guests have been put in healing pods, but they have suffered very serious injuries. The Botlam Dew has neutralized the mutagen, but their internal organs have been seriously compromised. Their meridians have also suffered damage, not to mention both their spirits and their souls. Lex frowned, thinking it was inevitable that they would still die. The condition they had reached in the inn was just too bad, and, keeping all of that in mind, they should wake up within a few hours, and be able to leave by tomorrow morning. That greatly surprised Lex. Damn, the recovery room was pretty good. Lex dismissed Velma and summoned Mary. Introduce the features of the recovery room to me. The recovery room, RR, is a special environment that promotes the body's ability to heal naturally. Currently it can host 6 guests at a time. Its limitation is that it can only speed up the healing process, so if the body is incapable of healing on its own, being in the room won't help. The recovery of a guest can be further aided by putting them in a recovery pod, RP. The room has 3 of those, which not only accelerates the body's self-healing further, but also heals some wounds that the body itself is unable to heal as well. The pod also acts as a life support system. This is a great way for someone to heal without damaging their vitality. This is also great for developing immunity for poisons, as the pod keeps healing the body from the effects of poison until it develops a natural immunity. Finally, the recovery room has a single organic reconstruction room, ORR, which instead of actual recovery, builds new body parts for the guest and replaces them for the guest. The new body part will be identical to the original in optimal condition. The ORR is special, in that while the other facilities of the recovery room can be upgraded, the ORR can only work on guests at the same cultivation or lower than the host, meaning you. The ORR is also not available on PB basis and needs to be paid for. Lex raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Even if the ORR was limited in its capability right now, it was very impressive. Let me know as soon as those 2 guests wake up, Lex told Mary, and quickly exited the inn. Lex had been lazing around for the last day, but the sudden entrance by a zombie scared. He needed to upgrade his authority as quickly as possible so that he could at least stop zombies from entering. While he did not have a direct way of increasing his authority at the moment, increasing his strength was also a way of doing so in the long run. Picking up his phone, he texted Marlowe his requirements for the weapon he had asked for. Although yesterday he was a little out of sorts with his random enlightenments, some of them truly did make sense. Having finally sent the message, he put on a tracksuit and went out to jog. His body had recovered a lot by now, but he was still sore. A little movement would do him good. Furthermore, he needed to think of ways to distribute more golden keys as the last one still had not been used. Lex let out a sigh when he thought of all that he had to do. It truly wasn't easy being an entrepreneur. Chapter 31 History of Vegas Minima. Lex had left his apartment with the intention of jogging, but currently he could be found doing pull-ups with the widest grin possible. It was still early in the day, around 6 a.m., so there was no one around to see him, otherwise people would either be extremely wary of his grinning face or would stop and spectate. Why was he grinning? It was because of how amazing he felt doing the pull-ups. What's the big deal? He already knew he had become more fit, so why was he suddenly so excited about his strength again? The answer was simple: he was doing shirtless pull-ups, completely showing off his abs. In his entire life, although Lex could not have been called fat or obese, he was never nearly fit enough to have visible abs. Now, however, they had appeared naturally despite his increased appetite since he started cultivating. He thought he was over his initial excitement of becoming stronger, but that was untrue. Time and time again he would encounter a new situation that would overwhelm him. Currently, he was daydreaming of a montage of himself doing insane things, wearing a leather jacket but with no shirt so he could show off his abs while he listened to epic music. He knew that if anyone saw him it would seem like he was showing off, but so what? He was definitely showing off, and he was definitely doing it on purpose. It felt good to be able to show off. "Your 2 new guests are waking up," said Mary, appearing before him. She was blushing as she tried to keep a straight face, but every few moments she would glance at his body. Suddenly, Lex was more embarrassed than excited. Lex stopped and coughed, pretending to clear his throat as quickly put his shirt back on. "Good morning warm-up," he mumbled, just loud enough for Mary to hear. She didn't show any reaction, as if it were a matter of fact. The air hung with awkwardness for the few minutes it took Lex to return to the inn. In the recovery room, Brother Chen and Blaine had woken up, but they were incredibly groggy. They lay flat on their backs in the recovery pods, staring up at the ceiling. The pods were filled with dense spirit energy, several times higher in concentration than the outside, that the pod was using to accelerate the healing process. On their own it may have taken a few more minutes for the 2 of them to collect themselves and gather their thoughts, but when a man appeared suddenly before them he drew their attention and woke them from their trance. "Welcome guests, to the Midnight Inn," Lex spoke with a warm, charismatic voice. "You were quite badly hurt when you arrived, but fortunately we were able to save your lives. It'll be quite a while though, before you've fully recovered." "What? How?" Brother Chen asked in confusion, trying to get up. The last thing he remembered was facing the Tier 3 zombie when a floating golden door appeared. Before he could get up though, a loud commanding voice filled his ears. "Be calm." Lex, who had used some of the power of the host attire, put a little bit of pressure on Brother Chen so that he would lie back down and stop moving. Just the simple attempt at getting up had already torn open some of his newly healed wounds, causing him to start bleeding again. "Be at ease, we will not hurt you." You must be confused, surely, but I will answer all your questions. Try not to move too much, however, as you have not fully recovered and it would be a shame to delay your complete recovery. Brother Chen and Blaine both, who were still recovering mentally, realized their physical condition. Under normal circumstances they would have already died. It was best not to push their luck. I do not know what happened before, but when you arrived you were being dragged by a rather rude fellow who had no interest in being a guest. Naturally, upon his misbehavior he was punished accordingly. Lex spoke in a relaxed voice, but when the two realized that this gentleman in front of them had casually taken care of a tier 3 zombie they were horrified. How strong was he? You may not be familiar with the inn, so let me introduce you to it. The Midnight Inn is a refuge for the weary traveler of the universe, a place where you may rest and enjoy before continuing on your journey. It is a place filled with both pleasures and opportunities for you to avail. It is a place where you can meet friends and comrades from across the universe, and see beyond the only horizon you once knew. As for me, you may call me the Innkeeper. Your planet, Vigus Minima, is a newly connected one that has access to the inn, but one of many across the universe. I must congratulate you on being the first guests from your planet to the inn. Both the soldiers froze as they processed what they heard, but quickly Blaine's eyes shone with excitement. Can you access other planets? He asked, his voice filled with desperation as well as expectation. Does that mean you can take us away from Vigus Minima? I'm sorry, we do not provide such a service at the moment. Perhaps in the future it might be a possibility. Please, Blaine pleaded, our planet is overrun by zombies. People die every day, we can barely survive. Lex felt a tinge of guilt, but he quickly suppressed it. First of all, it was not in his capability to help, but even if it was, God knew how many planets out in the universe were undergoing such crises. If he became so strong that he could govern the universe in his hand, maybe he would consider bringing peace across the universe, for now he had to focus on his own survival. Sympathy was good, but not when it put him on a path to self-destruction. Dear guest, try to understand, Lex spoke politely yet firmly. This is an inn for the heroes of the universe. We provide safety and opportunities for those who are fated, but even so nothing is free. I accepted you as guests under our pro bono wing, but if you want to avail more benefits from the inn it will be up to your own capabilities. Blaine and Brother Chen were both disappointed, but dared not beg the mysterious innkeeper for help again. He had already helped them tremendously by healing with and curing them from the mutagen, a fact they took for granted Lex was able to do since he could access planets across the universe. Furthermore, they were slightly inspired. When Lex said it was up to their capabilities, it was a polite way of saying that it depended on how deep their pockets were. He needed MP, but the two mistook his meaning. The fact that he talked about heroes and opportunities in the same breath made them think he was hinting that the inn would provide them with a chance to solve the problem, but ultimately they had to solve the problem themselves. No one would do something for others for free. It was already a blessing that he was willing to help them at all. We understand, said Brother Chen. Thank you for the help you've given us. Please let us know if there's any way we can repay you. Lex smiled. That was a better attitude. No need to be so formal, helping guests is my duty. But while I have you here, and since you can't leave the recovery pod for a short while, why don't you introduce your planet to me? I can't help you guys directly, but maybe I can think of a few services that might be helpful to you. Their eyes shone with hope, and the two soldiers began introducing their planet to Lex. The history of Vigus Minima was a long one, but the zombie pandemic had occurred from before the two soldiers were even born, so they hadn't received any formal education on it. Despite that, what they knew was plenty for Lex to be amazed at. Vigus Minima was one of 3 planets that had been occupied in the Vigus solar system, and was the smallest one. The other was called Vigus Magnum and was the largest, while the world that humans in that solar system had originated from was called Vigus Prime. Theirs was a civilization based on technology, which seemed to be much more advanced than that of Earth. They had no cultivation system in the sense of the cultivation that was followed on Earth. They used to grow their strength via genetic enhancements, and then used spirit energy to further strengthen their genes. That had since changed as the zombie pandemic made it impossible for the people to manufacture overly complex machinery, as most countries and cities had since been destroyed. The 3 planets had been disconnected for a long time now, and it was unknown what the situation on the other 2 planets was. Humans lived a more nomadic life now, forming temporary villages or towns for a few years at most before stronger zombies would notice them. Or at least, that's how the soldiers had lived their lives. If there was a place with the strength to deter zombies and protect their citizens long term, it was far away from the continent they had lived on. As for how they cultivated, that had also changed. No longer able to rely on advanced technology, the people now relied on what was called zombie cores, found in the brains of zombies, and used its special nature to strengthen their bodies. It was still spirit energy, but of a different kind. That was to say, while they could use normal spirit stones to strengthen their bodies as well, it would not have the same effect as using zombie cores. The strength of the zombie cores corresponded to the zombie's strength, with tier 1, 2, and 3 being equivalent to body tempering, chi training and foundation respectively. The two soldiers continued to tell Lex whatever random information they could think of for a few more hours, before ultimately they became too tired and Lex asked them to rest. As he left the recovery room, his eyes were filled with a capitalist gleam as he thought of all the possibilities. Chapter 32 Guests Meet. By the way, Lex asked Mary casually as he munched on some homemade, in-made, baked chips. What are the requirements for a PB guest, pro bono guest? He needed to calculate how long Chen and Blake would be at the inn, and if they would have any free time after they left the recovery room or if they would be immediately sent back. The most basic necessity I guess is someone who can't afford the inn's commodities, she replied, sitting on Lex's shoulder. But there are a few conditions. Firstly, no one can be a BP guest more than once. Secondly, they must have a certain need that the inn can fulfill. You can't randomly accept a homeless man as a guest, even though staying at the inn for a while would solve his homeless problem. Once he returned he would not be any better off. This means that anyone who becomes a PB guest needs to be better off somehow when they leave. As the foremost universal establishment, our services can't be shallow or without lasting effect. Once a PB guest's needs have been met, they can stay for at most one day to rest and prepare before they leave. Thirdly, PB guests don't need to use a golden key to enter. If you see someone you think deserves to be a PB guest, you can directly assign them the status and when they should be invited, and the inn will directly bring them in at the time you chose. You can only assign PB guests once a month though, most of the time PB guests will be chosen directly by the inn. When and how the inn will choose, I cannot say. Lex nodded, shoving a spoonful of chocolate fudge sundae in his mouth. Where were the chips? He already ate them and had moved on. How long do you expect someone to keep eating the same thing? And will they get golden keys upon leaving? Yes, of course, any guest who leaves the inn will get a golden key. How else do you expect to get return customers? At least, until you level up your authority, that is the most reliable method for guests. By the way, since there are 2 other planets near Vegas Minima that are inhabited, why didn't they show up on the list when I was using the golden ticket? Each time you use a golden ticket the list shown is random. There is no guarantee that you will see all the inhabited planets in an area. However, since you have access to Vegas Minima now, you can directly gain access to the other planets in its solar system by purchasing access via the Midnight Inn market. The same applies for the planets in Earth's solar system, but that access is just a little more expensive than you can afford at the moment. For example, let alone Mars, just to gain access to the moon you would have to spend 10,000 MP. Lex nodded again, taking a sip from his Oreo shake. The inn really had some amazing food service. Not being able to afford access to those planets was a minor surprise, because he was expecting not to have enough authority. Either way it was out of reach for now. The question on his mind was how much to invest in his 2 guests. If they just left with their own golden keys, they may not share the knowledge with others out of greed for keeping the key for themselves. If he gave them a few extra keys, maybe they would distribute them to their confidants, which would increase the number of guests. Other than that, should he also give them something from the gift shop to act as an incentive? But they were relatively weak. If he invested too much in them and they died once they returned to their world it would be a waste. His plan was to use them to distribute some keys and invite more people in. When his authority increased he would build an armory so that he could also sell weapons, something the people of Vegas Minima dearly needed, as well as a few entertainment establishments so that his guests could blow off some steam and relax. Currently those buildings weren't available to him, not to mention that he did not have MP to spare. Speaking of increasing his authority, Marlowe was taking his sweet time using his key. Taking a few days to prepare made sense, but Lex could not afford it if he took a few weeks to prepare, as that would put him past the quest deadline. He had just a little more than 2 weeks before that deadline ended. Lex planned out his next series of actions for a while, before deciding on practicing a bit. To be honest he would rather relax and play games, but after his experience in Vegas Minima they seemed boring to him. What he really wanted was the adventure and excitement of exploring new planets, but logic told him he should wait till he was a little stronger before returning. Till then, practicing combat and getting used to his strength would be the best use of his time. Furthermore, his hand-to-hand combat was actually quite terrible. Although he had learnt a few things in Marlowe's class, most of them were ways to avoid or trip up his opponents instead of fighting. Marlowe's class focused on self-defense, and according to Marlowe until they entered chi training and were able to use spiritual techniques there was no point in focusing too much on fighting and instead focus on escape and evasion. Still, for those who wanted to do extra work online tutorials were made available by Marlowe. The reason why Lex followed Marlowe's tutorials instead of others he found online was because his techniques set the foundation for other techniques he would learn at Shi training. It was good to build a foundation. As he trained, he did not notice the hours go by as in his mind he was always focused on zombies. He kept imagining fighting them, in one-on-one combat as well as in groups. He had also asked Velma to make recordings of his training so he could watch himself back later, and when he did it became apparent to him that his techniques were quite bad. It was hard to tell when performing them, but the deviation between his moves each time he performed them was huge. It was fortunate that most zombies were not intelligent or he might not have survived. He was unaware of how refined his techniques had become when he had zoned out while actually fighting. He continued non-stop, until finally Gerard stopped him to tell him his two guests had left the recovery room. "We should learn everything we can about this place," whispered Chen as he and Blaine walked out of the small, circular building. Around them they saw a large garden, populated with trees few and far between. In the distance he could see a large building, which he assumed was the inn. The weather was pleasant and the atmosphere was serene. It all seemed quite calm and normal, different from what Chen had assumed when he had met his impressive yet intimidating host. Yet after a few moments, he realized the quiet and peaceful environment was much more impressive than anything else. His entire life Chen had never felt completely safe, even when he was in towns protected by walls and barriers. Yet here, he couldn't help himself from letting his guard down. Here, he felt at peace. Just that feeling of security made this place extremely attractive, let alone anything else they could offer. "I'd like to bring Iris here," mumbled Blaine as he walked barefoot through the grass. Where his shoes had gone he did not know, but both he and Brother Chen were garbed in a simple cotton tunic and pants. He had none of his gear, and hadn't seen it in the room they had left either, but he wasn't worried. It was unlikely that his things would be stolen. They weren't worth much to begin with anyway. The two soldiers made their way through the garden towards the inn, both lost in their own thoughts, when they saw their enigmatic host, the innkeeper, walking towards them with a smile. Behind the innkeeper walked a short, young lady who was dressed similarly, carrying a tray with a couple of glasses on it. "It's good to see you two recovered," the innkeeper said in a warm voice. He smiled at them in a welcoming way, but neither of the two soldiers could forget that this was the man who had easily taken down a Tier 3 zombie and this could not treat him lightly. "Have a drink, it's lemonade," the innkeeper signaled towards the young lady holding the tray. "I thought you two could use some refreshments as I give you a tour of our humble establishment." "Thanks," the soldiers quickly said as they grabbed the drinks, wary of offending the innkeeper. "Come, let me take you to the inn. And please, if you have any questions don't hesitate to ask." The two soldiers hesitated and looked at each other, before Brother Chen spoke up. "How can someone get access to the inn?" Even if the innkeeper never mentioned it, it seemed obvious that the inn wasn't actually in their world, and they had been teleported through the golden door. However, how reliable was it to wait for a floating door? There had to be a better way to come in. Some people can access it the way you did, by encountering the golden door. Most people will have to use a golden key. All guests get one when they leave, so you don't need to worry about not being able to come back. As thanks for answering my questions earlier, I will give you two a spare key each, so you can invite someone else if you wish. The innkeeper waved his hand and two golden keys presenting themselves before the soldiers, floating in midair, waiting for them to be taken. The two soldiers quickly grabbed the keys and thanked the innkeeper profusely, who only smiled at them in return. "What do you need to do to be a guest here?" Blaine asked, his mind thinking of Iris again. "You can spend 50 MP to reserve a room for a day, and can host one guest with yourself in the room. You don't have to get a room, and can just simply use our other services such as the gift shop, the recovery room, visit the restaurant, whatever you'd like. However, please be aware that if you visit the inn and leave without availing any of our services, you won't receive a golden key upon your return." The two soldiers continued to ask Lex questions, and he answered them casually whilst showing them the inn and introducing things. When the two soldiers discovered Botlamdu could prevent someone from being infected and turning into a zombie, their eyes shone with overwhelming greed. They didn't do anything though and only made a mental note of its price. The tour finally concluded and the two soldiers were getting ready to visit the restaurant for their complimentary meal as PB guests when a thin, middle-aged man entered the lobby from the stairs. He gave the two soldiers a look before turning his attention towards the innkeeper standing next to them. Lex smiled as he read the name above the man's head, Phallic. Chapter 33 Eavesdropping. Slowly, Phallic made his way towards the innkeeper as he used his spirit sense to investigate the area. Spirit sense was an ability those at a higher cultivation level attained that would allow them to perceive things in the greatest of details which were covered by their spirit sense. They could extract and withdraw their spiritual senses and use it to cover anything that was within their spiritual range. There were, of course, more uses to spiritual sense, but that was the most common one. He was surprised to see there were a few changes in the inn as well as new people, something he had not sensed at all from his room. This, along with the fact that he was not able to determine the innkeeper's strength, made the midnight inn extremely mysterious. Yet it did not matter much to Phallic. He was not there to make enemies with the man, so his strength mattered little, only his capability as a host did. As for the two other guests, they were too weak to hide anything from him, and he immediately saw through them. In fact, from the moment Phallic had been born he was already much stronger than the two soldiers, so he did not even have a concept for what the chi training realm was. In terms of strength they were virtually indistinguishable from the mortals who did not cultivate at all to him. "Innkeeper," Phallic said in an acknowledging tone. "There have been a few changes to the inn while I was sleeping. I'm surprised you were able to achieve such a thing without even letting me notice." Lex felt like if the host attire wasn't helping him control his facial features his lip would have twitched. The man had been asleep this whole time? "Of course," he replied, as if it was the most natural thing. "All our guest rooms have an isolating array so that no one outside can sense what is happening inside, while those inside remain undisturbed by things outside. Naturally, if you want to turn the array off you can let me know and I can have it done for you." That statement surprised Phallic. He had not noticed any arrays in his room at all. "No wonder I was unable to contact the young lady through the communication talisman, the rooms are isolated. In that case, please remove the arrays around my room. It would be a shame if the young lady tried to contact me, but was unable to." Lex nodded and used his control over the inn to deactivate the isolating power over the rooms. In fact, there were no arrays covering the rooms. The inn naturally kept the rooms isolated, but it was easier to explain to guests this way. "It's done," Lex told, his mind running through a million things. For a moment he considered asking Phallic about the earth the same way he had the two soldiers, but then disregarded the idea. The less he revealed to Phallic and Botat the easier it would be to keep up his Aude in front of them. "These two young friends," Phallic said, turning to Chen and Blaine. "I can sense the aura of the Vegas system on you. It has been quite a while since I was there last. Would you mind telling me about what's been happening there lately? I have been quite cut off from the universe lately." The man's words overwhelmed and intimidated the two soldiers, but it wasn't just that. He was infinitely stronger than the two and exuded a natural aura that should have overwhelmed them being so close. It was not something he would have had to do, just the strength of the man existing before them should have crushed their souls, though they didn't know that, they only knew that they should have been oppressed and that something was preventing them from suffering. It was the inn, naturally protecting its guests, but the two soldiers attributed it to the innkeeper helping them out. "Senior, I don't know when you came last, but for almost 200 years now Vegas Minima has been overrun by zombies. As for the other two planets, we lost communication with them long ago and don't know what their status is. They are probably in the same situation, if not worse." "Zombies?" Phallic repeated the unfamiliar term, slightly curious. "Bottom-level demons," Lex clarified, repeating the information he had received from the inn. "Ah, bottom-level demons." Phallic grimaced for a moment, but quickly his expression returned to normal. "I'm sorry my young friends, I would like to help you, demons are truly despicable, but according to the Henali Convention I am unable to interfere. You will have to deal with this on your own." The two soldiers smiled wryly, they did not expect any help anyway. The innkeeper had already let them know that their fate was in their own hands, and could only be changed through their own efforts. "Thank you for your care, Senior," Chen said. "Although we have suffered, we are not without hope. We will reclaim our planet through our own efforts." Chen was only trying to portray himself as heroic, but his words truly gave Phallic a good impression of the man. "Come young friends, tell me a little more about these zombies." Phallic led the two soldiers to the restaurant where they sat and discussed zombies and everything else about their world, while ordering a truly tremendous amount of food. Phallic turned out to be vegetarian, but instead of salads he ordered a list of Indian foods while the two soldiers had steak. As a reliable AI assistant, Velma would take care of the cooking like she had been doing for Lex this entire time. Lex left them to their privacy so they could talk, but not really. How could he give up this opportunity to learn interesting things from them, mostly Phallic since he had already interviewed the soldiers? For example, this Henali Convention, although Lex had no idea what it was, he knew it was something that prevented Phallic from helping the two soldiers. Maybe that information would be useful one day. Sitting comfortably in the garden he used the power of the host attire to secretly listen to everything his three guests were saying. Upstate New York, Will Bentham's mansion. Old man Will sat in a wheelchair looking at the kneeling young mercenary in front of him. He had been thinking of solutions to his problem as of late, and suddenly remembered a rumor he had heard once. Death soldiers. Soldiers trained to sacrifice themselves for a cause. A lot of families and organizations cultivated them, and they were only loyal to them. But there was another way someone could get a death soldier, and that was by wielding the endless, unsurmountable power of money. Okay, putting it like that was an exaggeration, but occasionally some cultivators who were in desperate need sometimes agreed to bind themselves to others in exchange for what they needed. The binding was done through a soul contract, which in itself was a rare item, but a very useful one as it gave the binder the power of life or death over the bonded person. But still, such a situation was rare. Will called a few old friends to put the word out he was looking for a death soldier. Initially he expected to wait a few months at the very least to get a response, but who knew he got a call just one day later. In front of him was a young mercenary who had made a small name for himself doing expeditions on the moon. Unfortunately, the cultivation world is not a peaceful one and someone had killed the soldier's family while he was away on one of his expeditions. It had been a few years since that incident, but try as he might, the mercenary was unable to find out who the culprit was and what was their motive. On the moon things were a lot more chaotic than on Earth. For example, while Bluebird tried its best to maintain the peace and investigate any crimes in its designated areas of control, there was no such law-enforcing organization on the moon. There each and everyone only looked out for themselves and their own interests. So the man had finally turned to desperate measures. He agreed to become Old Man Will's death soldier as long as he helped him investigate his family's death and help him with his revenge. I have given the order. The Bentham family has officially started looking into the death of your family, quietly for now, to avoid attracting attention. I will let you know as soon as there are any results. Thank you, my lord, the kneeling mercenary replied. I will fulfill my end of the bargain. Will smiled, hearing the young man's words. He waved his hand and a man dressed up in a suit brought what looked like an empty syringe to the kneeling mercenary and handed it to him. Without any hesitation the mercenary stabbed himself in his heart with the needle of the syringe and pulled the plunger outwards. However, the syringe didn't pull out any blood, instead it was filled with a silvery translucent material. The process looked painful and the man grunted a couple of times, but did not stop. Once he was done the mercenary handed the syringe back to the suited man, who then presented it to Will. Will carefully picked it up and injected the silvery substance into his hand. When he finished, a small tattoo that looked like the mercenary before him appeared on the back of Will's hand. The soul contract was complete and the mercenary had handed a small portion of his soul to Old Man Will. Naturally, Will did not have complete control over the mercenary's soul, as the conditions of the contract had been imprinted into the syringe used to extract and deliver the soul. If Will tried to force the mercenary to do anything outside of the bounds of the agreed-upon contract, he would immediately lose control of the small piece of soul and it would dissipate. Similarly, if the mercenary tried to break his word or go against Will, the soul contract would immediately alert Will, who could then punish the mercenary. Now then, Will said, excitement filling his body, I believe you know your assignment. He presented the golden key to the mercenary, who took the key and immediately crushed it. There was no hesitation in his actions or fear in his eyes. The man was willing to do whatever it took to get revenge. There was a flash in the room and the mercenary disappeared. Chapter 34 Hugo. Hugo Laurent was a self-made man even though his life had never been easy. But he was not one to make excuses and always worked towards improving himself. Despite his lack of resources and backing, on Earth he was considered a cultivation genius and the rate of his growth drew many eyes. Eventually he joined the Deepwater Brotherhood, an organization similar to a private military that operated on the moon and accepted various tasks too difficult or dangerous for ordinary cultivators. It was not the best treatment he could have gotten, but he could accept tasks as and when he liked and had relative freedom, as well as the protection of the Brotherhood as long as he didn't proactively offend someone. During his years working he built up a small fortune and started a family. With the way things were going he could imagine himself retiring early and returning to Earth. But when have things ever gone according to plan? Hugo dismissed his random thoughts and prepared for the worst as the flash faded and he found himself in a new environment. He was wearing synthetic body armor from head to toe and held what looked like an assault rifle positioned across his chest with a bayonet at its end. At his waist was what looked like a pistol, as well as an extremely sharp blade. In a small bag that was hung from his back he carried emergency medical equipment, as well as a few lightweight items that could prove useful in a difficult situation. He looked like a man ready for war, so he stood out like a sore thumb in his new environment. He found himself at the gate of what looked like a large estate. It gave off a warm and welcoming feeling, but Hugo would not let that fool him as he did not let down his guard. Having people drop their guard through a welcoming environment was a common tactic in various minor realms he had visited, though this did not seem like a minor realm. His primary mission in this place was to collect as much information as he could, and his secondary mission was to recover any treasures he could find. Therefore he scanned the area around him and made sure to memorize even the smallest of details. Before he could think of doing much else, a mysterious man suddenly appeared before him. Hugo's eyes shrunk in horror as he had only heard rumors of teleportation in very high-level cultivators, but had never seen it. He tensed up and got ready for an altercation, but did not make any sudden movements. He did not want to provoke the other without understanding the situation first. "Welcome to the Midnight Inn, dear guest," the mysterious man said with a smile. His voice had a magical effect, and made Hugo want to naturally trust him. But the feeling of wanting to trust him alarmed Hugo even more. "Be at ease," the man said, laughing at Hugo's tense demeanor. "We are a reputable establishment. We do not hurt our guests. Would you like a tour?" "Sure," replied Hugo curtly. He let go of his assault rifle and let it hang from its strap, but remained ready at any moment to use it. The mysterious man had an amused look in his eye, but said nothing as he led him towards a manor in the distance. The Midnight Inn is an establishment that is connected to many worlds across the universe. We provide our guests with a rare place to rest and relax, away from their troubles. Of course, we provide services other than residents as well. Currently we only have a small gift shop with a few items from different worlds, and a recovery room to allow guests to heal from various injuries, but over time we will include more options. By the way, it seems I forgot to introduce myself. You can call me the Innkeeper. I run this small establishment. The innkeeper's explanation seemed far-fetched and Hugo instinctually felt like it was impossible. How can there be an inn that connects to various worlds across the universe? Then he remembered that he entered this place by teleporting using a golden key, and that made him a little unsure. During the tour, when they entered the restaurant, he saw 3 people sitting at a table being served food by a young lady, discussing in great detail about the history of some place called Vegas Prime. He instantly recognized that 2 of those people were in the chi training realm, but the third man gave him an oppressive feeling like he'd never felt before. Without any doubt Hugo knew this man was the strongest being he'd ever met, but he was just sitting casually eating what looked like a spinach dish with some naan. A part of Hugo told him that this was all an illusion, that the innkeeper was still trying to fool him, but a much greater part told him that he was not qualified to be fooled by such a man. When he accepted the reality of what was happening, his mindset changed immediately. He dropped his guard completely and paid greater attention to everything around him. In theory, the place seemed like a simple estate, and not even the most impressive one Hugo had seen. But in practice, everything around him made him feel like he was in a mystical place. While walking through the garden towards the recovery room, Hugo instantly realized that his cultivation seemed to have loosened up a bit, and it once again was possible for him to progress. That truly shocked him since he hadn't even been here for 30 minutes. "I recommend you spend a day in our recovery pod," the innkeeper told Hugo when they visited the recovery room. "You don't have any obvious injuries, but I can see that you have various hidden injuries in your body that haven't fully recovered and have hampered your cultivation. Once you heal them, you will notice that the speed of your cultivation will increase exponentially." Hugo thought for a minute, and analyzed his situation. Everything he encountered was vastly different from what he expected going into this, but his mission parameters were to get as much information as possible. Using the recovery pod fulfilled and determining its effectiveness fell into that category, right? Hugo stopped hesitating and pulled his small backpack forward and unzipped it. He reached in, and pulled out what could possibly be the most powerful weapon he had ever wielded, Will Bentham's credit card. "Do you accept cards?" he asked. "Naturally," the innkeeper replied. Lex smiled as he allowed the inn to swipe the card in Hugo's room. The man didn't even ask the price, and this was exactly the kind of customer Lex liked the most. Using the recovery room cost the inn 30 MP a day, so Lex had set the price as 50 MP. Using the recovery pod a day cost the inn 150 MP, so he set the price as 250 MP. As for the ORR, it cost the inn 1000 MP per hour. Lex hadn't determined a price for that yet, and would consider it when he needed to. The payment was accepted and Lex led the man to the recovery pod. Above his head Lex could see his details. Name, Hugo Laurent. Power, Middle Foundation Realm. Species, Human. Midnight and Prestige level, not yet available. Below this was a unique set of information that only became available after they entered the recovery room. Conditions. Meridians stretched. Slightly damaged ribs, spine, skull, left shin, left knee, left arm, left hand. Intestines slightly damaged. Liver slightly damaged. Cardiovascular system slightly damaged. Report. The patient has accumulated various injuries all over his body that never completely healed. The patient will suffer no deterioration in their quality of life, but will suffer from a negative impact on their cultivation speed. If untreated, the patient will never surpass the Foundation realm. Any attempt to cross the Foundation realm will exacerbate the damage to the body and cause the Foundation cultivation to collapse. Lex was pleasantly surprised when he saw the information, and was quite thankful he had another way to pull guests into the inn. Furthermore, he was also filled with anticipation. If Hugo decided to rent a room before the 2 soldiers left, then he would reach maximum capacity, and Lex had a gut feeling that something good would happen if he did. Lex's smile grew as he watched the fully armored man get in the recovery pod. His luck really was good, and that one key he had left on the train had come in handy just at the right time. Chapter 35 Gun. It had been a few hours since Hugo went into the recovery pod, and on Earth it was evening now. The inn reflected that as the sun in the sky was setting. It wasn't an actual sun, but rather a projection of one. The manor was well lit and tiki torches were placed around the garden along with a large bonfire. These were sudden changes Lex implemented since he had guests sitting outside, enjoying now. Honestly, he was quite surprised that Phallic was getting along so well with Chen and Blaine, but after listening for a while he realized that it was mostly him telling them the history of their world. He looked like an amicable elder teaching young kids while reminiscing about the past. Lex listened in, but after a while he lost interest. Right now he was just waiting for Hugo to leave the recovery pod, and hoping for him to rent a room. Healing his wounds would naturally take longer than the two soldiers since he was at a higher realm, but it should be close now. Lex was also interested in Hugo's weapons. Even if they had the shape of regular guns, he didn't believe for a second that they shot normal bullets. During this time he also looked at his 2,291 MP leftover from all his expenditure and considered if he should add a few more features to the inn. Currently he could add the greenhouse or the meditation room. Once he bought the greenhouse he could buy seeds from the midnight market or bring some of his own and plant them in the greenhouse to grow. When the plants grow he could use them for various purposes, but there was a catch: getting a greenhouse required him to get a dedicated employee. For now he had Velma and Gerard doing multiple tasks, but the greenhouse would require an employee dedicated only to it, regardless of whether there was anything growing or not. That sounded expensive. The meditation room, on the other hand, was a large one-time purchase and required no maintenance and was very beneficial to cultivators chi training and above, but that single one-time purchase was kind of expensive. He wanted to save up to raise his cultivation level, not to mention he felt the need to keep an emergency fund in case he ever failed a quest or needed to make a payment. While he was considering his options, Mary appeared to let him know that his phone was ringing back on Earth. Curious, he returned back to his apartment and was pleasantly surprised when he saw who was calling. It was Marlowe. "Hello," he greeted, picking up the call, only to be responded with the sound of uproarious laughter. "How does it feel to be rich, huh boy? Bet you already spent your first $1,000,000. Lex smiled and looked at his phone. He'd gotten a notification that the payment had been transferred to his account. "Not yet," Lex answered truthfully. "I was busy and didn't check my phone. But you can rest assured now that I know the money has been transferred. I won't hold myself back from spending it." "Great. Great," the man roared. "I was afraid you were like one of those people who like to hoard money and spend only a little. You can't grow if you don't use what you have. Anyway, I have your weapon as well. If possible, come over today to pick it up. I have a few things as well I'd like to discuss with you." "I'll be right over," Lex exclaimed and left his apartment as quickly as he could. He hailed a cab and in 20 minutes was at Marlowe's apartment. The door was opened by Marlowe's butler, who was expecting Lex this time, and led him directly to the gym where the giant man was attending a call. Noticing Lex's arrival, he quickly told the person on the call he had to go and hung up. The human-shaped bear said nothing to Lex and only pointed towards a briefcase with a mischievous grin. This time Lex was also excited as he reached for it and, with trembling hands, opened it. Before him lay a silver handgun in the shape of a desert eagle, with 2 magazines as well. But this was no ordinary gun, this was a spirit weapon. "Let me introduce you to your new weapon, the heavy Harley. Each magazine takes a different kind of ammo," the giant said, picking up the gun. He loaded the first magazine that had a silver stripe on it and aimed at a minion bot from Rent-A-Minion that was standing nearby. Without hesitation he fired 5 bullets, firmly denting the minion all over its body. The gunshots, surprisingly, didn't make a lot of sound. The first kind of magazine fires spirit bullets. The strength of each bullet is equivalent to the strongest attack of a 9th grade chi training cultivator. The bullets are quiet and fast, and each magazine can carry up to 100 bullets. Once the magazine runs out you can use spirit tokens to refill the magazine. Spirit tokens were a relatively common commodity in the cultivator world, at least between low-level cultivators. 100 spirit tokens were equal to 1 spirit stone, in price at least. Marlowe unloaded the magazine and put the other one in the gun, this one with a bronze stripe. This one takes actual physical ammunition. The heavy Harley can take iron-ranked low-caliber rounds, and can in theory gravely injure an initial Foundation realm cultivator. The magazine can carry 10 bullets. He fired a single bullet at the minion and its head exploded. This gunshot was still not as loud as he expected, but was like a firecracker exploding next to them. The headless minion kept standing, as if the head made no difference, but its shoulders slumped as if it was depressed. Marlowe fired a few more shots until there was nothing of the minion left standing, only random robot parts on the floor. Lex grinned and took the gun from Marlowe, feeling the cold metal in his hand. It was heavier than expected, but nothing Lex couldn't handle. This was the realization that Lex had. Why should he try to be low-key and use swords when better and more convenient options were available? Not to mention that it took care of enemies at long distance. According to Marlowe, there were various spirit techniques available even for guns from as low as chi training. As for standing out too much in a low-tech world? The world of cultivators was full of mysteries. Trying to account for every possible situation would leave one unable to ever leave their homes. He would handle it when the situation arose. Marlowe summoned another minion who stood 20 feet away from Lex, awaiting its fate. Try the spirit magazine first, get a feel for it. Lex swapped out the magazines and aimed at the minion. His stance wasn't that great, and considering that this was his first time using a gun, he should have held it with both hands instead of one, but Marlowe did not comment. Experience was the best teacher. He would value advice more after knowing what he did wrong. Lex aimed for a few seconds at the minion's head, and then fired. The sound of the shot was still suppressed, but everything else was completely different from when Marlowe used the gun. Let alone that he missed the minion completely, the recoil of the shot bent his stretched arm and the gun was now pointing up in the air. Damn! Lex exclaimed, taken by surprise, but Marlowe only grinned. The show had just begun. Using both his hands this time, Lex lined up the shot and after a few tries managed to hit the minion. It was not that Lex's aim was bad, but that even with the strength of body tempering he could not handle the recoil, which deviated his shots. Try the other one, Marlowe said, swapping out the magazines. If Lex had paid attention he would have noticed the anticipation on the man's face, but he was too focused on the gun. Lex aimed at the minion again, holding the gun with both hands again. When he felt ready, he fired. Whether the bullet hit the minion or not was something Lex never found out because he felt like his body had been hit by a truck, and he actually fell backwards. He felt an intense pain in shoulder, and knew that he had dislocated his arm. The recoil was too strong for Lex. There was no way he could use this magazine without raising his strength first. Marlowe, who had been waiting, finally burst out in laughter. Nothing in life was easy. If Lex wanted to use guns to fight cultivators, he was only setting himself up for just a different kind of difficulty. Chapter 36 Changes. After laughing for a bit, Marlowe yanked the disoriented Lex off the ground and skillfully popped his dislocated arm back into its place. After making sure that Lex wasn't hurt anywhere else, Marlowe put the handgun back into the briefcase and signaled Lex to follow him. Lex, still in shock at what happened, followed the giant man. The difference between Marlowe's steady hand repeatedly firing shocks without any visible change, and himself being launched off his feet after a single shot was too mind-blowing. They retreated to the lounge where a butler served them some herbal tea. Have some, it'll nourish your body. You've been through a lot lately. Lex took a sip, and was pleasantly surprised. The tea had a very subtle taste of honey, but more importantly he immediately felt a warm sensation spread through his body. It was like his muscles were being massaged from the inside, making him feel very comfortable. This is tea from a hidden monastery near Mount Tupungada. It's something I used to drink when I started body cultivating. It's not useful to me anymore, but I still enjoy the taste, so I keep it on hand. For you though, it should be very beneficial. I can tell, thanks, replied Lex, having recovered from his previous shock. Do you know why, even as a body-tempering cultivator, you need to use a spirit gun when it's so difficult to use? It's because regular guns, even high-caliber ones, only rely on basic force to deal damage. The basic concept is, if I hit something harder or with more explosive energy it'll do more damage. In theory, that is not wrong, but in practice anything with spirit energy is extremely resistant to any force lacking spirit energy. So against a cultivator, in practice most of the time even an assault rifle will inflict less damage than the weakest spirit weapon. This is only considering a cultivator's body that has been tempered by spiritual energy, and their internal spiritual energy. Body armor, talismans, spirit techniques and anything else a cultivator can use only add more variables to overcome. A normal Foundation realm expert, with his average gear, can easily withstand an attack from a tank. The Heavy Harley is named as such because of its heavy recoil, but it is the best gun for someone at body tempering to use on the market. Once you raise your level a bit, you'll be able to withstand the recoil better. Marlowe explained a bit, in case Lex was dissatisfied with his weapon, although all of this was common knowledge and if Lex did his own research he would learn all this sooner or later. During this period Marlowe was relatively calm, and went almost 15 minutes without bursting into laughter. Clearly he was treating this very seriously. Lex smiled after listening to his explanation, and said, I understand. There is no gain for free. If I want to use the gun I need to improve a bit. You do not need to be concerned, I am very satisfied with it. But you could have just sent the gun to me. Since you called me here, there must be something else you want to discuss as well. Marlowe let out a knowing smile before he chugged his tea in a single gulp and put the cup down. He lazily put his back against his sofa and spread his arms on the side. His appearance looked very casual, yet he gave off the aura of a king in his own kingdom. I want to know more about the tests you encountered when you used the key. What were your tasks? What were the dangers? How were you evaluated? What do you think I can expect when I use the key? Since I am about to undertake this test, I should be fully prepared, don't you think? Lex smiled, and internally he was filled with jubilation. Marlowe was finally about to use the key. The first time I encountered the key, the test was really simple. I was given a cultivation method, and I had to cultivate it in a set time. Who evaluated me, or how they did it, I don't know. As a reward, I was given a pill that increased the durability of my body. I'm sure you've already noticed that compared to others, I can really take a beating. Marlowe only grinned, but said nothing. The second time, before the test began, I met someone and was offered something, and if I accepted the offer I could take the test, otherwise I could go back. What I was offered and who offered it, I don't remember anymore, but I remember thinking that this was a valuable opportunity. After accepting, I was sent to a different place. Where that place was I have no idea, but I remember thinking it felt like a different world. My task was to kill a certain number of zombies and... Zombies, did you say? Marlowe interrupted, leaning forward. Like in the movies and games? Yes, zombies. If they scratch you, you'll be infected after a certain amount of time. But it's not entirely like movies and games because not all zombies have the same strength. Some are stronger than others. One-on-one I had no problem fighting them, but the hordes are too dangerous because they're too many and the stronger ones mix in and you can't tell the difference. As far as his experience fighting the zombies was concerned, Lex told Marlowe everything. If he lied or made something up, there were greater chances of failure. Since he planned on having Marlowe fight zombies as well for his test, this was the most appropriate solution. From time to time Marlowe interrupted Lex to ask questions in greater detail or clarify some things. The meeting continued for several more hours before Lex found himself repeating what he already knew. Still Marlowe asked him again and again to ensure he understood everything. In the end, when the finished, Marlowe helped Lex register the gun to his name on the Bluebird portal. As soon as Lex left he got a text message from Marlowe addressing his beginner self-defense class where he cancelled all classes for the next week, and assigned them some non-mandatory tasks in case they wanted to do some extra practice. Lex returned to his apartment and immediately returned to the inn to await Marlowe's appearance. A part of him wanted to practice with his gun, but his logical side told him he wasn't ready for that yet and he should not waste his relatively expensive ammunition. First he would go to a shooting range and work on his aim with regular guns before trying to use the heavy Harley. When he returned to the inn he also found out that Phallic had returned to his room and the soldiers to theirs. Apparently the soldiers were going to leave the inn but suddenly felt like they could break through to the Foundation realm. Previously it was all but impossible, but once they recovered from all their old, unhealed injuries due to the recovery pod their cultivation became smoother. After a few hours to stabilize, they immediately felt like they could break through. They decided to try and see if they could succeed before they returned to their planet as that would greatly improve their chance of survival. Eventually, Lex's patience paid off. It still wasn't Marlowe, instead Hugo, who left the recovery room and excitedly asked to rent a room for a week. Lex happily accepted the 350 MP from the man's credit card, which was followed by another notification from the inn that he temporarily ignored, and asked Gerard to take Hugo to his room. When the man left his view Lex quickly checked his status and was delighted. New notification, hidden achievement unlocked. Hidden achievement, at maximum capacity. Reward, authority +1, 1 free in expansion, in star rating +0.5, plus 2000 MP. As soon as Lex checked the rewards, a subtle change swept through the inn. Like a wave, spirit energy rushed across the inn as the area of the inn increased exponentially. Lex could not feel the change in spirit energy, but all of his guests were overwhelmed. The two soldiers, both meditating in their PB rooms, felt a rush of extremely pure spirit energy enter their bodies and suddenly consolidated their cultivation to form their foundation realm. Their bodies shivered with excitement, but they couldn't afford to stop and continued to cultivate to stabilize their new realm. Hugo, who hadn't even begun to cultivate in his room yet, felt a wave of spirit energy fill his body and strengthen his foundation to the point where he almost immediately entered peak foundation realm. For the first time in years Hugo felt excited for a moment before he stabilized his emotions and quickly sat down on the floor and began to cultivate. The biggest shock, however, was received by Batet and Phallic. When the wave of spirit energy entered the inn, it wasn't spirit energy that entered their bodies, but a higher and more complex form of energy. Batet, who was asleep, woke up to a feeling of horror and excitement. Excitement, because she had instantly recovered enough to where she could leave Earth immediately on her own, and horror because she knew all too well what level of power that energy represented. Phallic, likewise, knew what it meant and immediately stood outside Bastet's room, awaiting his mistress's exit in case she needed him. At this moment Lex didn't know how the changes had affected his guests. As the only person in the inn unable to feel spirit energy, he did not know how tremendous an opportunity he had missed. His focus was on better understanding his reward and thinking about the hidden achievement. The land available to the inn had increased by a couple of acres, that he understood easily enough. The half-star rating meant he could now better cater to guests at a higher realm, or at least that's what he assumed. He was looking into all the new things he could do with his newfound authority, and they really were exciting. Chapter 37 Growing. With the increase in authority there were new upgrades for the inn available for Lex to buy. Firstly, he could increase the size of the building and add new rooms, as well as purchase a private courtyard that could be rented to guests as well. There were 3 new buildings he could buy as well, a training room, a guild room and a patisserie. The training room had combat dummies at various levels that a person could spar with. The guild room was less of a place where the inn offered services and more of a place for guests to interact. Guests could put up and accept requests in the guild, at a price of course. The patisserie, naturally, was a bakery that sold pastries and sweets, though for that he would need to hire an actual baker. Furthermore, he could increase the level of the buildings he already had as well. Another very important thing that he was rather concerned about was that he could completely purchase AIs for the inn, though currently he still had some time with Velma and Gerard. Lex had to think of how he could use these new upgrades to increase the inn's income. He had only just begun planning when he noticed both Phallic and Batet exiting the manor. Phallic had returned to his form of a bull, and Batet was once again seated upon his back in her litter. With a warm smile, Lex made his way to the unusual duo. He had been waiting for Batet to leave her room so he could have an opportunity to talk to her. Alas, his desire would remain unfulfilled. "Welcome, guest, I hope you've rested well." "Indeed, I have," the cat replied with her previous pomp reduced, though Lex didn't seem to notice. "It has been a very pleasurable experience resting here, but unfortunately I must depart. I wanted to thank you for your hospitality." Lex was taken aback. He had not expected them to leave so suddenly when they had already paid for a month. "It's my pleasure to host you. We will keep your room reserved for the rest of your original duration if you wish to return." The cat hesitated, but eventually said nothing. Internally she couldn't wait to leave. The power she felt earlier was tremendous, and someone with that strength would not be afraid of her father's influence. That meant that she wasn't really safe, and she did not dare to tarry. In the end the two left without saying anything. Leaving the Midnight Inn for a guest was extremely easy. They only needed to think about their intention to leave and they would be returned to the area they were received from, with the golden key in hand. The bull and cat returned to Earth for less than a millionth of a second before they tore open a hole in space and escaped. The tear was quickly repaired and there was no proof of them having ever been there, except for 2 keys which eventually dropped on the ground. The two didn't dare take the keys with them, even if it could allow them to return to the inn, as they knew a higher-powered being would be able to track them if they carried his treasure. Hours went by and the 2 keys lay on the barren ground until a hawker from the nearby village was leaving towards the city. He saw a shining glint on the ground and picked them up. He observed them for a while before trying to bite into one of the keys. He wasn't able to leave a mark, which meant it wasn't gold, but regardless they looked pretty enough to where he could sell them. The hawker added the 2 keys to his wares. Lex had no idea that his 2 keys had been abandoned by his most powerful patrons, and then dismissed by a hawker as cheap trinkets, which was for the best as he would be dumbfounded and unable to react if he did. In Marlowe's apartment, the giant behemoth of a man was nearly ready to depart using the platinum key. He had pushed all his commitments forward and prepared the little gear he planned to take with him. Before him were a few pills that he planned on taking right before leaving, as well as a protective talisman he had planned on activating. But right as he was about to begin, his butler told him he had a guest. When the man saw who it was, he raised an eyebrow in curiosity. It was Lex's female class fellow in his self-defense class, Matilda. From head to toe she was covered in blood, most of it dried, some of it fresh from her wounds. The scene looked very familiar to how Lex had come to him just a short while ago. His new students really didn't like living safely. That thought put a wide grin on his face. "Come, let me fix you up." Without asking the young girl anything, he carried her to a small clinic that he had in his apartment. As a multimillionaire, what did he not have in his apartment? He lit up an incense and sprinkled a red powder over Matilda's wounds that made her grimace. "Clean her up," he said to a nurse who was standing by. "Come to me when you're done." Marlowe walked to his lounge and waited for his student. None of his 3 students were normal this time around. Lex was someone his family was ordered to investigate, something that would shake the whole world if word got out because everyone would ask the question, who exactly could order around the Bravi family? Lex, as the target of the investigation, naturally wasn't as normal as he tried to portray. His acting was not so bad, but as an experienced man Marlowe could instantly tell when he was hiding something. Then there was Larry, the renowned good-for-nothing of the once famous Dershaw family. His reputation was so astounding that when the Dershaw family was destroyed, and the few survivors banished to the moon, he was specially exempt from the banishment because his enemies found it amusing to watch him try and struggle. Finally, there was Matilda Ross. At first glance there didn't seem to be anything too special about her, but in the little over a week that she had been his student she had risen from a stage 1 body-tempering cultivator to stage 4. She also picked up combat skills like she was picking up money from the floor, and her focus was the most extreme Marlowe had ever seen. Marlowe continued to muse until finally Matilda entered the room. It appeared as if she had taken a shower and had changed into a pair of jeans and a shirt, with most of her body being wrapped in bandages under her clothes. "How are you feeling?" Marlowe asked, his voice filled with amusement instead of concern. "Excellent," Matilda replied, as if she did not look like she was at death's door. "I need a little help. I want to enter the Grand Canyon tournament in 2 months. I need to get an invite, but I don't plan on joining any organization. You know, you need to be at least a chi training cultivator to join, right? Don't I have 2 whole months to reach it?" Matilda asked, nonchalantly, before getting up to leave. Marlowe burst into an excited laughter as he thought about what his student was planning. He never actually said he would help her, and she didn't stay long enough to chit-chat either. It was as if just letting her intentions be known was enough. When she left Marlowe's building 2 Bluebird agents were waiting for her, wanting to take her in for questioning. She expected as much, and didn't resist. Her mind seemed to be elsewhere as they escorted her, and her eyes were filled with determination. Larry Dershaw, the heir to the family that used to be the richest in all of North America, slowly picked himself up off the floor with wobbling arms. He had a black eye and several bruises, but that's what one should expect when they accept a job as a sparring partner in the Grievers Club. The Grievers Club was a small business that catered to the newly rich. They catered to those who had just entered the cultivation world, and had not had enough time to build up their resources and foundation. To train their children in live combat, they would join the Grievers Club and pay for sparring partners, though lately they had tremendous demand for one specific partner, Larry. Who didn't like to take advantage of those who were down on their luck? Since Larry got paid for it with resources, he usually accepted all requests. The Grievers Club would cover his medical expenses anyway, and weapons weren't allowed, so he never got seriously hurt. If his opponents tried attacking too viciously, the club had overseers to stop them. Even as amusing as it was to bully others, they couldn't afford an inquiry by Bluebird. "See you tomorrow, kid," said a particularly fat man as he watched Larry leave the practice room. Larry didn't respond, but the fat man didn't mind and simply watched him leave with a mocking look on his face. Who could believe that the whelp before him once underwent a $300 billion procedure to allow him to cultivate, but still failed to do so? Nobody knew why he could cultivate now, but nobody cared too much either. Not everyone in the cultivator community took pleasure in bullying him, but everyone took him as an example of how quickly the mighty can fall in the cultivation world. Larry was oblivious to all of this. Deep in his heart he knew the only reason he was continuing to struggle was because he had seen a small glimmer of hope. Would that glimmer of hope be strong enough to carry him on his journey? Even he didn't know. Chapter 38 I Refuse. Bautet and Phallic left quickly and everyone else returned to their rooms, leaving Lex free, so he thought about how he could increase his MP earnings. Of the 3 new buildings available, none were suitable for purchase at the moment. The greenhouse could allow him to raise some rare plants, but he had no seeds at the moment, so that was also useless. The meditation room was the most suitable for purchase, as well as upgrading the recovery room. But both of those had a hefty price and he didn't want to pay that at the moment. Instead, he bought 2 more rooms for 500 MP each as well as a courtyard for 1000 MP, spending a total of 2000 MP, leaving his remaining MP at 2641. The rooms were added on the first floor, like the others, but the courtyard was built on the ground. It was rectangular in shape and had 2 rooms on the opposite end of a small garden that was right in the middle. The garden had only a single blossom tree, a stone bench and a small pond. The courtyard could house a total of 4 guests, but 3 of them had to be with the primary guest who rented the courtyard. Even though the courtyard was bigger and could house more people, they all had to be from the same party. After he was done, he decided to curb his spending for the moment and roam the expanded area of the inn and think of how to landscape it, but before he could start, a certain tiny assistant popped up before him in the air. "Get ready," said Mary, "Marlowe is using the platinum key." Lex smiled, thinking, finally. Where will he appear when he uses the platinum key? At the inn? No, Mary said. She snapped her finger and suddenly Lex appeared in a familiar, white room. All miscellaneous and activities will happen here until you designate a place. Lex looked around the brightly lit, empty room. Not bad, it looked exactly the kind of room a mysterious organization would use. Before he gets here, how exactly is this supposed to work? And what exactly does a valet do? When Marlowe arrives, the system will give you a detailed report about him and his cultivation. Then you can propose a test, and the system will adjust the difficulty to match the inn's standards. Of course, the test will have to be relevant to the position they're taking. For example, you cannot test a chef by asking him to paint. As for the job requirements for a valet, they are pretty simple. Sometimes a guest staying at the inn might want to invite others to stay with them at the inn, or want some personal belongings they left back in their world. A valet's job is to go to the guest's world and escort the others back to the inn, or bring back their belongings. It's not complicated, but to avoid unexpected incidents it's usually best if the valet has a high cultivation. Of course, if the request is too dangerous for the valet's cultivation level, the system will warn you in advance. Sounds simple enough. And once a valet has been hired, will the system pay them automatically? Indeed. The system will evaluate the strength and skill of any employee and pay them through MP according to their level. They can then use the MP to purchase things or services from the inn. Sounds simple enough. For a moment, Lex quickly analyzed what the inn could offer Marlowe as an incentive. The man was at least in the golden core realm. It seems that currently the only incentive he could give currently was the ability to travel to other worlds. He had to make it sound as appealing as possible. A silver-colored door appeared before Lex and through it came the hulking figure of the man Lex was expecting. He was wearing a simple sleeveless shirt, shorts and sneakers. His exposed arms and legs showed off his extremely well-defined muscles, as well as numerous scars. At a higher cultivation level, scars were actually rare since the body had a stronger healing capacity, therefore the presence of the scars spoke volumes about the strength of those that inflicted them. On his neck was a golden tattoo that hadn't been there previously, and it gave off the subtlest glow. That was it. That was all Marlowe had brought with him on this dangerous endeavor, no weapons, no other gear or healing items. Or at least, that's what it seemed like on the surface. He felt Marlowe's gaze upon him, as he also inspected the man. Then he turned to the system's report. Name, Hanson Marlowe Bravi 3. Age, 67. Sex, male. Cultivation details. Spirit cultivation, golden core, crippled. Body cultivation, golden core peak, unique cultivation. Species, human/prime human. Bloodline, evolving. Remarks, extremely unstable energy has detected coursing through his body. Please treat him like a walking volcano. For a moment, Lex went into shock. His golden core had been crippled? And what was a prime human? This was also the first time he saw a mention of bloodlines. Nevertheless, he couldn't waste time thinking about these things, he had to maintain his prestige. Welcome to the Midnight Inn. I am the innkeeper. Marlowe grinned upon hearing the man talk, and looked around the room. My name's Marlowe. This is a little different from what I expected. Oh, and what did you expect? To be honest, I thought I'd be led to a minor realm connected to Earth and Spirit Treasure would administer a test for a nascent soul inheritance. But clearly, this is something else. What makes you say that? The spirit energy. There's no place in the entire solar system with spirit energy this concentrated and pure. Marlowe spoke with zeal and his excitement was evident from the glow in his eyes. Indeed, the Midnight Inn is not on, or anywhere near Earth. In fact, we are not on any planet, and our purview is not any single solar system but the entire universe. Lex paused to let Marlowe absorb what he was saying. We accept guests from all over the universe, and provide services that they can only dream of. Naturally, an establishment of our size also leaves small tokens of fate across many worlds for those with the strength to seize them. So what I encountered was a token of fate? Marlowe asked. Naturally. I won't say it's impossible, but for anyone on your planet it would be incredibly difficult to ever overcome the constraints of their birth and encounter the greater universe. Only through an unsurpassed lucky encounter would they have the chance to venture out to the civilizations beyond your own. It just so happens that you have encountered such a lucky chance by being given the opportunity to join the Midnight Inn. So the test is like a job interview? Marlowe suddenly cut in between Lex's speech. And if I pass I join the inn as an employee? Lex waved his hand and a silver contract appeared floating in the air before Marlowe. The contract stated, in simple terms, his responsibilities and his remuneration. Marlowe, who had been so far maintaining his calm, suddenly started hyperventilating. From the contract he felt the same power that had been tempting him for long through the key. His crippled core started aching again, as if signaling him that through this he would find the opportunity to heal it. The blood coursing through his veins started heating up, as if letting him know that he had found that opportunity he was looking for a breakthrough. His bones rattled as if letting him know that there were great rewards waiting for him. "And if I sign this, and I pass the test, will I join the inn forever?" Marlowe asked through gritted teeth. It was a testament to his will that he kept asking questions and hadn't signed it already. "Naturally," Lex answered, not noticing the peculiar wording of the question. "Through the universe is within your reach, and its secrets are yours to discover. Which is why we are very picky with who joins, but once they have joined we take the utmost care of them." "I'm sorry," Marlowe replied, his entire body tensing up, "in that case I refuse." Chapter 39 Trial. "I refuse." The words weren't spoken loud but clapped like thunder in Lex's ear. He froze in surprise, unaware of how to react. Mary, who was secretly watching, also froze in shock. The system itself forgot to give the notification for the failed quest as the present circumstance was so unexpected. Marlowe's body began to tense up and his muscles slightly flexed, preparing for any reaction. Lex, with his low cultivation, would never have noticed the minute changes on his own, but the aid of the system and the host attire made him cognizant of anything happening around him while he was there. He let out a defeated smile. Marlowe was adamant in his answer even if it meant he might encounter a fight. "Relax," Lex said, "the choice is yours, no one will force you. But if you don't mind me asking, why did you decline? I don't think our offer is lacking. For anyone else, it's not. I've spent half my life with a crippled core and never heard of anything that could fix it, but your contract I could feel a chance to heal. I've spent my entire life looking up to the nascent realm, but out in the universe I can't even imagine what else there is to find, maybe, things I dare not even think of." Marlowe's voice trailed off, as if he was thinking of something. Lex did not disturb him, and Marlowe did not leave him waiting for too long. "But no matter how tempting the offer, if I accept I will become a subordinate for life. I will have to bend my knee, have to bow my head, and that I cannot accept." His voice was suddenly full of vigor again, his eyes burning with determination. "Maybe to others it may seem like a stupid notion to give up such an opportunity for my pride, but to me there is no reward high enough or threat grave enough to make me yield. Everything I am, I have built step by step, encountering foe after foe, overcoming death time and time again. Maybe because of this, I will be stuck on Earth for the rest of my life, with no hope of breaking through. Maybe there will be countless others who will surpass me in the universe, reaching heights far greater than my own, but no one, no one, on Earth or in the rest of the universe can ever make Hanson Marlowe Bravi 3 kneel." As soon as the enthusiastic giant was done with his speech, Lex received the painful notification of failed quest as well as the 1000 MP that he lost. But at the moment he wasn't paying attention to it, his focus was entirely on Marlowe. To be honest, he was really starting to admire the man. It was a pity that he could not get him to join as an employee. "Mary, is there anything else I can do right now?" Lex asked, communicating mentally. "I really don't want to miss out on this opportunity of having Marlowe work for the inn." The tiny floating assistant appeared before him, her brows scrunched up as if she was deep in thought. After a moment she said, "The influence of the inn spans the universe, its services are numerous, and its reach infinite. Naturally, to support all of this you will need to gather subordinates of your own, but not everything has to be done by yourself and your subordinates. That's exactly what the trials were made for. You can use them as a way of maintaining a relationship with Marlowe. The only thing you need to consider is how to reward him. Based on Marlowe's current condition, there are two things he currently really needs. Firstly, he needs his core fixed, and secondly he needs the various injuries in his body healed. Right now you cannot fix his core, but if you upgrade the recovery room once you can heal his body through the RP. That is the opportunity you can provide him." "Then let's do that," Lex said, suppressing his once again bleeding heart at the MP he'd have to spend to upgrade the recovery room if Marlowe completed the trial. But it was a short-term loss for a long-term gain. He wanted to establish a relationship with the giant. Furthermore, he knew exactly what kind of contract work he could offer Marlowe, as he had long been trying to figure out a way to get his hands on some special items. "I admire your spirit," Lex said aloud to Marlowe. "Normally, if someone were to reject my contract, which has never happened before, just by the way, I would simply send them back. But you, I feel like offering you another path, a trial, if you will. If you succeed you will get a reward, if you fail you get nothing." Marlowe frowned when he heard the offer, not immediately accepting it. "Why would you offer me another path? You don't stand to gain anything from it. Think of it as me taking an interest in you. I've shown you a path to surpass your world. If you have the guts to take it, if you have the strength, that remains to be seen." With that Lex waved his hand again and another contract appeared before Marlowe. It stated the conditions for the trial, and the option to accept or decline. If he accepted he would be transferred to the location of the trial, and if he denied he would be returned to Earth. Before Marlowe could finish reading the conditions, Lex disappeared. There was nothing left for them to talk about, and if Lex tried to persuade Marlowe, that would diminish his image as the Innkeeper. Marlowe noticed the Innkeeper disappearing, but returned his attention to the trial conditions. It read, within 7 days kill 10,000 Tier 1, 1,000 Tier 2, 100 Tier 3 and 10 Tier 4 zombies and recover their cores. After 7 days, or when you have recovered the cores, you will automatically be returned to the inn. Reward, heal all injuries in your body besides the core. From talking to Lex, he had some idea that the tiers reflected body tempering, chi training and foundation realms reflected Tier 1, 2 and 3 respectively, so Tier 4 probably was also equivalent to golden core. Considering he couldn't afford to get scratched, this was a difficult task, but when had he shied away from difficulty? Marlowe let out a mad grin and accepted. As soon as he disappeared, Lex and Mary reappeared, looking at the place where the giant once stood. 10 Tier 4 zombies might be too difficult, don't you think you made it too hard? Since he wants me to pay for his recovery, he should also pay the price. Lex would not admit he was slightly bitter about being rejected. It was totally to cover the cost of his MP. When Marlowe reappeared, the first thing he saw was war. He was standing on a cliff, looking down at a city under siege. The city had walls over 30 feet high and 10 feet wide, made of some kind of metal. The walls were covered in some kind of force field that started to burn any zombies that came within, but the burning was not enough to stop the zombies. Massive cannons and turrets shot non-stop at the endless hordes, and soldiers unleashed their techniques at any zombies that were nearby. But all that firepower barely caused a ripple in the horde that looked like it contained several million zombies. Not to mention, not all zombies were the size of regular humans. Massive beasts that looked like giant 20 feet tall lizards with 6 legs as well as wings formed what looked like a cavalry as they charged at the city from the skies, only to be shot down by air turrets as well as cultivators flying using some kind of strange bodysuits. Although Marlowe had lost his spiritual sense when his golden core was crippled, his instincts had been honed when he cultivated his body, and his instincts were telling him that golden core level cultivators were dime a dozen on this battlefield, and there were many who surpassed that realm. This was the most astounding battle he had ever seen, and instead of fear he was filled with endless drive and excitement. Earth had become too boring for him, and since his cultivation journey had come to an end, he barely had anything to drive his ambitions. Although he had discovered some ways to increase his strength without increasing his cultivation, it was a slow and new process, so it was unknown where it would lead him. But in front of him now was a new world with a much broader horizon, and it was up to him to reap its gifts. The first thing he did was analyze the situation. Someone who only knew of his reputation might find that strange, as they would have expected the excitable giant to charge right in. But he was not stupid, in fact he was quite a bit smarter than anyone knew. He did not reach his level through blindly charging into fights, he was actually quite meticulous. His massive appearance and excitable personality were in fact his greatest ruse, to trick people into underestimating him. He loved being underestimated, especially when people underestimated his intelligence, it made his task so much easier. Furthermore, he was cultivating his body using a method he came up with himself, but it also filled him with unstable power that often hurt his body and caused him great pain. When he was unable to keep from yelling from pain, he would start laughing and use that as a cover to scream. Right now, the most foolish thing he could do was to attract attention, from the zombies or the people of the city. He would attack the hordes from the sides and slowly complete his trial. He kept observing for a few hours, and when he had a good understanding of the flow of battle as well as the terrain, he jumped off the cliff and right into the edge of the zombie horde. It was time to begin the trial. Although he jumped from a great height, Marlowe landed on the ground softly as if he were a feather floating in the wind. The millions of zombies in front of him didn't seem to notice him as they were busy stampeding towards the city mindlessly, which was perfect for Marlowe. He looked through the horde and could easily tell that various tiered zombies were mixed throughout. 10,000 Tier 1, 1,000 Tier 2, 100 Tier 3 and 10 Tier 4 zombies were a lot, but to Marlowe it was nothing difficult, he just needed to decide the best method to do it. The glow of the tattoo on his neck increased before small gold-colored sand-like particles started coming out from it and spread over Marlowe's body to form a full-body armor. The tattoo on his neck was actually a talisman. A talisman was a special kind of product made by cultivators that basically performed a function, any function. How a talisman was made, how it functioned and what were its limitations was a complex science that eluded everyone except for the most accomplished academics. The only thing most people cared about was that talismans could accomplish various tasks, and even perform attacks like spirit techniques, and used up no spirit energy from the user, which is why they were always in high demand. But unlike ordinary talismans, the one on Marlowe's neck was made up of hundreds of smaller talismans, each with their own use. Even superheroes in movies these days used nanobots as if they were candy bought from a store, so why couldn't he, a dignified cultivator, use nanotalismans? The concept was his own, and these specific talismans were invented and are still created only by a company that Marlowe founded, though the best of this kind of nanospirit tech he kept for himself. People tried to plagiarize the idea. Marlowe personally escorted those people to their own funerals. The golden armor quickly changed colors once it was complete, and produced a camouflage effect. The man pointed a finger at the nearest zombie, a dignified Tier 3 zombie, and a needle shot out from his armor hitting the zombie in the brain, killing it. Marlowe pulled the dead body towards himself and retreated to a cave in the cliffside. He examined the zombie's body thoroughly, but its biology made no sense to him. Broadly, it still resembled a man in that it had 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso and a head, but that was where the resemblance ended. Its skin was almost metallic to touch and its internal body was nothing except bones, muscle and what he assumed were meridians. There was no other organ in the body. The head had a wide mouth and 2 eyes as well as abnormally large ears. When he cracked open its head he did not find a brain, but instead a crystal in its skull suspended by what Marlowe had earlier assumed were meridians. The needle Marlowe shot earlier had torn all the meridians to pieces, but the crystal was completely intact. He reached to pick up the crystal, but as soon as he picked it up, it disappeared from his hand and he received a mental notification that he had submitted 1 Tier 3 zombie core to the Midnight Inn. So that's how it is, he murmured softly, before bringing out his signature mad grin. It was time to hunt. This time he did not bother being subtle, and slammed his body directly into the horde as if he were a bull charging through a wheat field. Within a few moments the momentum of his body had already killed dozens of zombies, but the needles he shot out were numerous and extremely precise. In but a few moments all the zombies within 50 feet of him fell onto the floor, dead. Yet his achievement was akin to a drop of water compared to the raging tide of zombies, and before anyone could notice the dead zombies, more had filled the area. Thoroughly in the center of things now, he did not release any more needles and stuck to killing those zombies within his reach. Unbeknownst to anyone else, small grains of sand fell off his armor and clumped together on the floor until they formed a small, robotic-looking snake. The snake slithered to the nearest zombie Marlowe had killed and quickly swallowed its core, before moving on to the next. Marlowe did not stop killing zombies for even a second as this happened. The armored glove on his fist changed shape to add spikes, so that each of his punches tore directly through the tough skin of the zombies and attacked the core. In but a few minutes he had already killed over 100 zombies. What their tiers were, he did not bother keeping track of. Some zombies tried attacking him, and he was so thoroughly surrounded that it was impossible to dodge, yet they could do nothing to his defenses. That is until 3 Tier 4 zombies took notice of him and surrounded him, signaling the lesser-tiered zombies to keep distance from Marlowe. Surprisingly organized, Marlowe murmured, his grin still ever present. 3 Tier 4 zombies, meaning 3 enemies equivalent to Golden Core, surrounded him, but he was not intimidated. This was but a warm-up. His real goal, one even beyond what the trial had asked of him, was far greater than this. After Marlowe left, the first thing Lex did was question Mary. What's a prime human? Why is it written differently from a normal human? As I already told you before, there are many subspecies even among humans. This is merely one of them. Prime humans, or a prime of any physical life form, are those that focus on growing stronger by elevating their physical body. They are distinct from body cultivators, as body cultivators still use spirit energy to temper their bodies, but primes directly alter and elevate their genes. They are commonly also mistaken for bloodline cultivators, because of the various similarities. However, there is one distinct difference between the two. Bloodline cultivators often absorb the bloodline of stronger beings and merge with them, taking on some of the traits of the stronger being. Primes, however, only use other bloodlines as nutrition to elevate their own inherent bloodline. This form of cultivation is extremely rare in the universe, and extremely difficult. You may not encounter a single prime in a million worlds, not because others don't try it but simply because the chances of dying are so high. Lex accepted the answer, and silently gave praise to the mad giant in his head. He truly was a unique character. But for now none of that had anything to do with him, so he returned to the inn and started exploring all the extra land that the inn had gained. It was flat land, without the few sparse trees he had previously planted, and looked very mundane. Originally Lex was of the mind to simply add more trees, but then decided to alter the landscape a bit. West of the main inn building Lex started altering the land to form a few hills. Originally he wanted to add more foliage and include a few hidden areas as well, but when he looked at the cost he was incurring he simply decided to cover the hills with various flowers. For now this would do, but Lex's eyes glowed as he envisioned all that he could do in the future when his income increased. For now, this small expense of 200 MP to add the hills and flowers was already a burden on him. When he returned to the inn he learned that Brother Chen and Blaine had already left. As soon as they stabilized their new realm they returned to the forest where they came from as they were anxious to get back to their caravan. It was unfortunate that Lex missed their departure, but he was hopeful that they would return. Or at least pass on their keys to others. But with almost all guests gone, Lex turned his attention to other things. He returned to his apartment on Earth and logged into the Bluebird portal to investigate something that had been on his mind. It took him only a short while, but he had his answer. He promptly changed his clothes and left, catching a cab to a nearby gym. The gym itself was pretty normal, and was of a popular local chain of gyms in the city, but when he showed his Bluebird identity token at the reception he was led to a storage closet towards the back instead of the gym. As these things normally go, the storage closet was actually an elevator that took Lex deep underground. Nice cover, Lex commented to the receptionist who was escorting him. It's not a cover, the ground floor actually belongs to the gym. Bluebird is just subletting the basement. Getting your own space is too difficult, property is prime in New York. Lex's lips twitched. And here he thought the gym was a clever disguise like in spy movies. When the elevator opened he was welcomed to a sight more fitting to what he had been expecting, a shooting range. His aim with the heavy Harley was horrible, and he absolutely could not expect to use it without practice, and what better place to practice than a shooting range for spirit tech? Although it was quite expensive, as he soon learned. You could not bring your own weapons, and had to get one from the armory in the shooting range. A single spirit magazine for the heavy Harley cost him $12,000 in the shooting range. Given, a single magazine had 100 rounds but still. Fortunately he had plenty of money to spare, and couldn't be bothered to find a cheaper alternative. To be fair, a large portion of the cost was because the shooting range would provide him with a private room in which he could practice shooting, and the room had been reinforced to be able to take damage from all the spirit weapons. He also had access to numerous video guides on how to best use the weapons available via augmented reality in his private room, which should speed things up. When he entered his room and received his weapon, he set his target to be around 50 feet away and took his stance. He took his time to aim and fired a couple shots. He missed both of them entirely. Dumbfounded, he brought the target closer and tried again, barely hitting it this time. Eventually he turned on the AR tutorial for the heavy Harley, and before him appeared a stunningly beautiful girl holding the same weapon in her hand. The minimum base required to use the heavy Harley is 4th tier body tempering, and that too is only for the spirit bullets. This is not only because of the heavy recoil, which the body has to absorb and adjust for, but also because repeated use will harm the joints and tendons of the body unless the body is strong enough. Once you've met the basic requirements, the next thing you have to do is understand how the weapon works. The spirit bullets and physical bullets differ in how they are launched from the weapon. The spirit bullet is formed by first creating a spirit casing, which is then filled to capacity with unstable spirit energy. When the bullet is actually fired, the spirit energy in the bullet is allowed to leak, propelling the spirit casing forward with great momentum. However, since the propelling force of the bullet is the spirit energy within the bullet itself, the farther it travels the slower and weaker it becomes. Upon impact to a target, the spirit casing breaks, causing the unstable spirit energy to explode, inflicting damage. From this you can summarize that the closer the enemy the greater the damage the spirit bullet will inflict. The optimal range for the spirit bullet is within 100 feet or 30 meters. The physical bullet is different, in that the propelling force for each bullet is equivalent to the entire spirit energy used in a spirit bullet. Furthermore, the casing is made from a spirit metal called Haliver 6, which gives its high spirit penetrating properties in addition to its regular physical penetration capabilities. The optimal range for the physical bullet is in fact less than the spirit bullet, because the bullet suffers from a bullet drop effect due to gravity and a greater air resistance, and cannot be reliably used over 50 feet. Now that you have a basic understanding of the weapon and ammunition, it's time to tackle usage. For complete amateurs, if you need to use the weapon in live combat, it is recommended that you equip an aim assist attachment which will predict where and how you should shoot. However, do not become too dependent on those, as they can only factor in a few variables and ultimately only slightly improve accuracy. The best course is for you to become familiar on your own and improve your skills. First we will work on your standing accuracy, meaning your stance and shooting accuracy while standing still. The AR tutorial continued for hours, teaching Lex various techniques and skills required for shooting that he had not even imagined. By the time he had shot 20 spirit bullets, his entire arm started to ache and he could feel that his body was not used to the recoil. However, Lex was not concerned. He had a good way to heal if he ever got injured, and he was also confident in his cultivation method. The only thing he had to do now was improve his shooting. After a few hours he sighed to himself as he took a small break. "I'm so hardworking," he thought to himself, silently admiring his work attitude and diligence. Die, roared Marlowe as he split a tier 4 zombie in half from head to toe with a golden scythe. But there was no time to rest as two other tier 4 zombies launched bone spikes towards him. His body vibrated as he used Golden Sparrow, a movement technique to quickly move forward. The ground was crushed from the force of his feet, but he was already gone by the time the cracks in the ground spread. A tier 3 zombie stood in front of him, trying to stall him, but Marlowe simply headbutted the zombie so hard its head was crushed. He swung the scythe in his right hand endlessly, killing all kinds of zombies near him, while holding a 3 feet wide, circular shield in his left hand to defend himself from attacks. The original 3 tier 4 zombies that had surrounded him were long dead, and instead he was now being attacked by 6 tier 4 zombies and several lesser tiers as well. The golden armor he had originally donned was long gone, broken from the intense fight he was having, yet not a single drop of blood that covered his body was his own. 3 of the tier 4 zombies attacked him, each from a different angle. Marlowe, who was surrounded, was not anxious but instead excited. Endless halo, he roared, activating another talisman from his neck tattoo. A bright white light covered him, before taking the shape of a ring around him and spread out hitting the 3 zombies. The zombies were burned severely by the ring of light, but it did not stop them, it only slowed them. That, however, was enough for Marlowe, who swung his scythe with all his strength, launching some kind of spirit attack at them that destroyed their heads. The attack, however, destroyed the scythe as well. Marlowe did not let that stop him, as he activated another talisman that formed a golden double-sided sword in his hand. Using Golden Sparrow once again, he left his spot just in time to avoid another barrage of bone spikes launched by some zombies. This time he did not immediately attack again, as he retreated for a bit and activated another talisman, making a vial with a brown liquid appear in his hand. He chugged the liquid and threw away the vial, turning towards the 3 zombies who were only attacking him from a distance. "I just had 10 shots of espresso, you think a little distance can stop me?" Marlowe said while laughing. The sword in his right hand that originally had a golden blade turned bright red and started giving off searing heat. He was using the only technique in his arsenal that was of his own creation. It was a very stupid technique, one that involved filling a weapon with immense energy and launching it at an enemy, but it was extremely lethal. "Hadron Collider!" Marlowe shouted and threw the glowing red blade at the farthest zombie. Before the zombie even had time to register what was happening, its body blew up, and so did the few hundreds of zombies behind that zombie that the blade ended up piercing. Marlowe tried to activate another talisman for another weapon, but learned that he had already exhausted all his weapon talisman. He didn't let that stop him though, he activated a different talisman that formed braces around his legs. He used Golden Sparrow once again, his speed increased this time, to launch himself at the other zombies, but these last 2 tier 4 zombies kept dodging him, only using long-range attacks. They also commanded lesser-tiered zombies to form circles around them and attack Marlowe when he approached. Marlowe wasn't too concerned however, he had plenty of ways to overcome the situation. He was simply trying his best to not waste his energy too quickly. He was considering how to defeat the last 2 zombies as quickly as possible when he heard a voice. "Ben Shagohat." Huh? Marlowe looked for the source of the voice, but before he could do anything a woman appeared in front of one of the 2 tier 4 zombies and killed with a simple swing of her sword. She had donned a simple silver armor and held a single sword in her hand, her visage clean and pristine, a large contrast to her environment. "I don't speak your language," Marlowe said, grinning madly at the woman. He could feel a great strength coming from her body. She was a body cultivator as well, and one at a higher realm than him. "I said," this time Marlowe heard a voice directly in his head, already translated to English, "that you are very wasteful with your weapons." Marlowe instantly understood that she was using her spirit sense to talk to him, meaning that besides being a body cultivator she was also at least a golden core spirit cultivator. Marlowe's grin widened, and he burst into a mad laughter. His body let out a golden glow and he suddenly disappeared. His body reappeared, body slamming the last tier 4 zombie, crushing it into minced zombie. "I can't help it, it's been a long time since I've let loose like this," Marlowe said, casually killing the lesser-tiered zombies around him. The woman gave him an odd look, but quickly refocused on her purpose. "You have garnered the attention of a tier 5 zombie. Retreat to the city, I will cover you," the woman said in a very matter-of-fact way. "You've been fighting for almost 12 hours straight and have already fulfilled your kill quota for the month long ago. You can rest now." That made Marlowe burst into a mad laughter. His body started to radiate even more power, quickly attracting even more zombies towards himself. "Isn't that perfect? I've been warming up this whole time just for that. A tier 5 zombie, meaning a nascent level zombie. I really want to know what it feels like to fight one." In truth, this was exactly Marlowe's goal. From the moment he saw the zombie tide, its size and all the enemies it had, he had already put the trial from the inn behind him. Completing it was not difficult for him at all. No, what he wanted to do was kill a zombie at a higher level than him. As a child and as a mortal, he had killed a beast with the strength of a body-tempering cultivator when his village was attacked. When he started training and reached the peak of body cultivating, he killed a rogue cultivator at the chi training realm. When he was in chi training, he had killed an enemy at the foundation realm, and likewise at foundation he had killed enemies in the golden core realm. He had never seen a nascent cultivator before, and never thought he had an opportunity to fight one, but now that an opportunity had presented itself, how could he retreat? Are you sure? The woman asked, looking at him like he was crazy. Of course. Upon hearing Marlowe's reply, the woman left, as she could not afford to waste more time on him. If she ever saw him again, she would ask how his venture went. Most likely, if she ever did see him again, he would be a zombie. As soon as the woman left, Marlowe felt a hostile gaze fall upon him. All the zombies that were surrounding him retreated, and Marlowe was left in a rare clearing within the massive zombie horde. He looked in the direction the gaze was coming from and found a single zombie floating in the air, looking down upon him. This particular zombie did not look like it had rotting skin, but instead like a young handsome man, if you ignore his paleness. His hair was groomed, and the most surprising thing was that he was wearing proper clothes, not torn shred left from an unknown time. I can feel your blood will aid me greatly, Marlowe heard a raspy voice in his head. Slit your own throat, and your end will be painless. Resist your destiny as my prey, and your end will be miserable. Marlowe stared at the zombie with a bit of surprise. I didn't know zombies could talk. Before the zombie had any time to respond, Marlowe appeared in the air before him and launched a vicious attack. But I have no interest in talking. His punch, which had his entire brute strength behind it, could not even move the zombie back from where he was floating. But it did put a small smile on that delicate-looking face. I'm glad you chose to resist. The zombie flicked a finger and Marlowe was thrown to the floor, his so far relaxed expression suddenly turning grave. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and used Golden Sparrow to create some distance between himself and the zombie. His shield, which was in his left hand, crumbled into pieces from blocking that single attack. His weapon's breaking had no impact on Marlowe, but the shield breaking woke him up to a serious reality. Taking on the zombie was no joke. He had to go at full strength and could not waste a single moment testing the zombie. If he ended up taking even a couple of attacks like the one he just blocked directly, then it would be unlikely he could survive. His punch earlier used his complete strength without using any techniques, but that would have been more than enough to completely obliterate any golden core cultivator. On the nascent level zombie, however, it was not even enough to give him a push. Marlowe summoned all his strength in his body and then, for the first time in his life, activated his hidden bloodline. His giant body started to shrink, and his massively bulging muscles started to withdraw. His aged face slowly became young again, and the crazy glint in his eyes only increased. The pain in his body was amplified, not decreased, and he knew he could only stay in this form for a few minutes as the transformation of his bloodline was not complete yet. But in exchange, the power he received was beyond what anyone could imagine. This was the source of his confidence in facing the Tier 5 zombie. The now toned Marlowe let out one of his signature mad grins, that somehow made him look handsome with his new figure, and attacked. In this form he was unable to use any spirit techniques as his body was too unstable, but he had already planned for that. The golden tattoo on his neck glowed, and instead of a nano talisman activating, the whole tattoo was activated. A golden glow covered his fists as if he were wearing boxing gloves. The zombie that was so far treating Marlowe as a snack suddenly felt a threat, but could not react in time. When Marlowe's fist connected with the zombie, it let out a sonic boom and catapulted the zombie into the horde. But Marlowe gave the zombie no time to respond, no time to fight back, as he followed the zombie down and continued punching. He was not directly hitting any other zombie, but the constant sonic booms from his attack hurt any of them that were close. Within 20 seconds Marlowe had punched the zombie in the face over 100 times. The zombie's skin was like armor, and protected it well, but you could begin to see it cracking. The zombie tried to retaliate, but Marlowe was relentless and interrupted each of its attacks. The zombie opened its mouth to scream, but Marlowe grabbed its jaw and tried to pull out its teeth. In the horde of a million zombies and a war beyond normal comprehension, Marlowe's attacks were but a small blip that no one else paid attention to, but all the zombies nearby could not even understand why they were the ones dying when they weren't even the ones getting attacked. When 60 seconds passed and Marlowe reached half of his power limit, and knew he would only be able to stay in this form for 60 more seconds, he decided he could no longer wait. He focused all his strength and bloodline power in his right hand and released it all with a single punch. The ground beneath him caved in for a dozen feet and all the debris around him was blown away. All that was left was Marlowe, standing magnificently over the headless corpse of a Tier 5 zombie. Seeing that he had won, Marlowe used the last of his strength to laugh, his body drained of energy but filled with satisfaction. Even as his body fell backwards he kept laughing, and even as the zombie horde closed in on him, he did not stop. Fortunately, before any enemies that could reach him, a fat, golden snake slithered towards him and entered into his tattoo. He heard a notification in his head. 10,000 tier 1 core submitted. 1000 tier 2 core submitted. 100 tier 3 core submitted. 10 tier 4 core submitted. 1 tier 5 core submitted. Trial complete. Returning to the inn. And with that, his body disappeared, with no one the wiser of the great feat the once giant man had completed.